The Aegis spire was a steel dagger aimed at the heart of the void. It hung in high orbit over Earth, a monument of polished gray metal and blinking demarcation lights. The newest symbol of the Terran Alliance's hard-won victory. Below it, the blue marble of humanity's cradle seemed serene, almost fragile, protected by this new, brutal guardian. The spire was a fortress, a command center, and, most importantly, a prison. It was here, in the safest cell in human territory, that the Alliance kept its greatest prize, Empress Salith of the Nairi Star Empire. The war had been bloody, lasting over a decade and costing billions of lives on both sides. The Nairi were relentless, driven by a rigid caste system and a quasi-religious devotion to their Empress. Humanity had countered with desperation, industry, and a stubborn refusal to die. The temporary victory had been secured not by a decisive final battle, but by a daring, high-risk ambush. A covert strike team had punched through the Imperial flagship's defenses and captured the Empress herself. Without her, the Nairi fleet had fractured, their psionic coordination shattered. The war was not over, but it was paused, and humanity held the Queen. Salith's cell was no dungeon of stone and chains. It was a sterile sphere of immaculate white, bathed in light that was always too bright, and kept at a temperature that was always 2 degrees too cold. She sat not on a throne, but on a simple metal bench. She wore a plain gray prisoner's jumpsuit, a stark contrast to the obsidian and cobalt armor she had been captured in. The true cage was the device locked around her neck. It was a heavy collar of human design, a neural dampener, a psionic shackle. To her, it was a constant, dull weight, not just on her shoulders, but on her mind. The Nairi were a psionically active race, and as Empress, Salith was the nexus of their collective consciousness, the weave. Through it, she felt her people, guided their society, and commanded their fleets. The collar severed that connection. It left her isolated, deafened, and crushingly alone in a way no human could ever comprehend. She was tall, even for a Nairi, with sharp, aristocratic features and skin the precise shade of a deep twilight sky. She held herself with an impossible, rigid dignity. Her eyes, normally a vibrant, luminous purple, were now clouded and dull, robbed of their inner light by the dampener. She had not spoken a word in the 3 weeks since her capture. But beneath the cold, proud exterior, Salith was a storm of humiliation and incandescent rage. She was the Empress, a direct descendant of the first. She had been taken by soft-bodied, short-lived mammals, taken in an ambush that reeked of betrayal. She did not fear her captors. She loathed them with a purity that was almost holy. And she was patient. Miles above her, in the command citadel of the Aegis Spire, Admiral Harlan Pierce watched that same cell on his main view screen. The image was crisp, showing the Empress in profile, perfectly still. "She hasn't moved in 4 hours," a subordinate officer noted. "It doesn't matter," Pierce replied, his voice a low rumble. He was a broad, imposing man, his face a roadmap of scars and grim determination. He looked at the silent figure of the Empress not with triumph, but with a cold, settled hatred. "Let her sit. Her very presence here keeps their fleets in disarray. She is an asset." Pierce's hatred for the Nairi was not strategic. It was biblical. He had lost his wife and 2 daughters on Proxima Centauri during the first wave of the Nairi attack, 13 years prior. He saw them as insects, a plague to be eradicated, and he commanded the Terran Alliance fleet with an authoritarian grip that bordered on despotism. A light chimed on his console, a Priority 1 encrypted channel. Pierce dismissed the officer with a wave and activated the hologram. The figure that shimmered into existence was not human. It was another Neri, this one a male, slender, and draped in decadent robes. His face was obsequious, his eyes shifty. This was Regent Kalar, Salith's cousin and the newly self-appointed leader of the Nairi Empire in her absence. "Admiral," Kalar purred, the translator smoothing his alien sibilance into oily English. "I trust the asset remains secure." "She is Regent," Pierce said, his distaste for his new ally palpable. "Your assistance in the ambush at Cygnus was effective." "We both want peace, Admiral," Kalar said, spreading his long, three-fingered hands. The Empress. She was a traditionalist, a zealot. She believed in the old ways, in eternal war. I believe in progress, in harmony. Pierce narrowed his eyes. "Our agreement stands. You ensure the Neri fleets remain fractured and pull back from the disputed territories. In exchange, we recognize your authority." Of course. But there is one final matter," Kalar said, his smile never reaching his eyes. "A living martyr is a symbol for rebellion. A dead one is just dead. Her accidental death during an escape attempt would cement my rule and unite our peoples in a new era. An era of cooperation. Perhaps even work on our shared project." Pierce's gaze hardened. The shared project was HarmonyNet, a secret and monstrous piece of technology designed to create an interspecies mind control network. Kalar wanted to use it to solidify his rule. Pierce saw it as a tool to permanently end the Nairi threat by erasing their will to fight. And it required Salith's unique psionic signature, a signature that could only be fully mapped and weaponized at the moment of her death. "A convenient outcome for you," Pierce stated. "For us both, Admiral," Kalar corrected. "We are on the verge of a new order. All it requires is a final, unfortunate accident." Pierce stared at the hologram for a long moment. "I will take it under advisement. Regent." He cut the connection, leaving himself alone in the dim light of his office, staring at the captive Empress on his screen. Down on the planet's surface, shielded from the grand, cold politics of orbit by miles of atmosphere and smog, Rowan Blake was trying to debug a coffee machine. "No, I'm telling you," he muttered into his headset. "It's not a code issue. The replicator is printing salty coffee because someone in logistics ordered saline solution instead of micronutrient paste. It's a user error." He was working from his apartment, a tiny, one-room box in a towering slum known as the Covenant Stack, deep in the lower districts of Neo-London. The room was a chaotic shrine to nerd culture. The walls were covered in faded posters of classic anime mechs and long-dead virtual rock bands. Empty synth noodle cups and high-energy drink cans formed small, precarious towers around his custom-built PC rig. Its intricate, glowing water-cooling tubes, a stark contrast to the grime on the windows. Rowan Blake was the definition of a classic nerd. By day, he was a subsystem maintenance technician, Level 2, for the Alliance military's domestic infrastructure. It was the most boring, low-level IT support job in the quadrant, mostly involving resetting passwords and telling quartermasters to turn their replicators off and on again. By night, he was a god. He was a VR game developer, a pirate modder, and a legend in the DeepNet forums, known for cracking impossible code and building virtual worlds that were more real than the rainy, neon-drenched reality outside his window. He closed the work ticket, ticket 749-B salty coffee, resolution, not my problem, and toggled his screen. The boring Alliance service portal vanished, replaced by the complex, beautiful code of his current passion project, a VR mod for Void Kraken's Lair. Rowan himself was unassuming. He was in his late 20s, thin, with a mop of unruly hair and eyes that were perpetually tired from staring at screens. But hidden at the base of his skull, concealed by his hair, was a small, circular interface port. Years ago, he had been a volunteer for a disastrous military experiment called the Athena Trials, an attempt to create a direct neural interface for drone warfare. The project had failed, killing most of the subjects. Rowan had survived, just barely, with a piece of technology fused to his nervous system that the Alliance believed was dormant. It was not. He kept it a secret, living the life of a low-level nobody, all while possessing the ability to directly interface with and feel data streams. He was a ghost in the machine, and he was hiding in plain sight. His day job was a cover. It gave him low-level, unmonitored access to the Alliance military network. He was playing a long game, one of quiet, methodical data collection. Rowan Blake hated the Neary. His older brother, Liam, had been a pilot, killed in the first wave of the war when his cruiser was vaporized. The grief had hardened into a cold, patient anger. But Rowan also despised the Alliance government. He saw the propaganda, the jingoism, the censored news feeds that painted the war in simple strokes of good and evil. He had spent the last 2 years sifting through encrypted Alliance logs, trying to find the truth about his brother's death. The official report said Liam died a hero, fighting a Neary destroyer. But the data fragments Rowan had stitched together hinted at something else, an acceptable loss. A strategic sacrifice ordered by a human admiral to lure the Neary into a trap. Rowan was in the system, gathering data for a revenge he hadn't yet defined, against an enemy he could no longer clearly identify. Was it the aliens who pulled the trigger, or the command that put his brother in front of the bullet? He was pulled from his thoughts by a sudden, violent jolt that shook his entire apartment stack. The figurines on his shelf rattled. "What the hell?" he muttered, steadying his monitor. "Must be the maglev trains rerouting." On the Aegis Spire, there was no train. It was sabotage. A small, precisely placed explosive charge, planted by a Kalar loyalist, detonated deep within a power conduit. It was meant to be a simple power surge, just enough to disrupt the containment field on Salith's cell and give her a chance to escape. An escape Kalar and Pierce were waiting to turn into a martyrdom. But the saboteur had miscalculated the energy feedback. The surge ripped through the station's power grid. Red emergency lights bathed the corridors in blood-colored light. In Salith's cell, the white panels went dark, and the neural dampener on her neck sparked violently. The agonizing, dull pressure in her mind vanished, replaced by a sudden, blinding inrush of sensation. The weave. It was faint, stretched thin across the interstellar distance. But it was there. She could feel the distant, panicked thoughts of her people, searching for her. The sudden return of her senses was so overwhelming, it almost brought her to her knees. Alarms blared. Containment breach. Containment breach. Sector Gamma. Salith did not hesitate. She rose from the bench. Her psionic power, fractured and weak but hers, lashed out. She didn't touch the door. She focused on the complex electronic lock inside it. With a thought, she fused its circuits. The door hissed open. She moved through the chaotic corridor like a phantom. Guards shouted, firing stun blasts that sizzled against the psionic shield she barely managed to project. She was running on instinct, her mind screaming with the newfound freedom. She found the officer's escape pod bay. It was a mistake in the station's design, placing it so close to the high-security wing. She slammed her hand on the activation panel. On the bridge, Pierce saw the alert. "She's out, all decks converge on the escape bay, do not let her launch." But he was too late. A single, sleek pod shot from the side of the Aegis Spire, a silver needle plunging toward the atmosphere. "Fire!" Pierce roared. "Fire!" The Spire's point defense cannons locked on. Bolts of plasma energy lanced through the black. One blast struck the pod. Not a direct hit, but a catastrophic grazing blow. The pod's main engine died. It began to tumble, its communication systems fried, its outer hull glowing cherry red from the weapon's impact, and the sudden, uncontrolled atmospheric entry. Inside, Salith was slammed against her restraints. Warning lights flashed. The air was thick with the smell of burning metal. The small viewport showed nothing but a terrifying, spinning wall of fire as she entered the upper atmosphere. She was going to die. After all this, she would burn up, a meteor of no consequence. Rage, pure and primal, overcame her. No. She tore off her restraints. The pod was shaking itself to pieces. She placed her hands on the control console, ignoring the heat. The controls were dead. She couldn't fly it. She closed her eyes. She reached out, past the pain, past the fire, and poured every last shred of her remaining, flickering psionic will into the machine. She couldn't steer it with thrusters, but she could push it. She could influence its trajectory. She didn't know where she was aiming. She just aimed down, at the largest cluster of lights she could sense through the flames. A sprawling nexus of human activity. She would not die in the sky. She would die on their soil, in Neo-London. Rowan Blake was live streaming. "All right, chat. You see this," he said, his face illuminated by his multiple monitors. He had about 40 viewers, a respectable crowd for a Tuesday night modding stream. "If I can just glitch through this wall texture in the Void Kraken's lair, we can skip the entire lava level and get straight to the boss." He was manipulating code in real time, his fingers a blur on the keyboard. His virtual avatar on the screen vibrated against a digital wall. Suddenly, a high-pitched, piercing whine filled the room. It was not from his speakers. It sounded like it was coming from inside his skull. "Whoa," he said, pulling off his headset. "You guys hear that? That's weird. Maybe a feedback loop from the—" The whine became a deafening roar. His entire apartment shook. The noodle cups fell. The figurines on his shelf shattered on the floor. "What the hell is that, an earthquake?" he yelled, grabbing the edge of his desk. His stream chat filled with WTF and dude sounds. The ceiling above his bed exploded upward in a cloud of plaster and pulverized concrete. Then, with the sound of a dying star, it imploded downward. A metal object, scarred black and glowing with residual heat, tore through the roof. It annihilated his bed, sending an explosion of mattress foam and cheap particle board across the room. The capsule, a scorched and twisted wreck, crashed into the floor at a 45-degree angle and screeched to a halt, not 3 feet from his custom PC rig. Steam and smoke filled the tiny apartment, smelling of ozone and burnt insulation. Acidic rain began to drip through the massive, jagged hole in his roof. Rowan sat frozen, staring. His stream was still live, his webcam capturing his dumbfounded expression. The capsule hissed. A final, dying pneumatic sound. The cracked, bubbled canopy popped open. A figure slumped forward. Then, with a pained groan, pulled itself out. Rowan stared. It was a woman. No, not a woman. An alien. She was impossibly tall, her skin the color of night. Her gray prison jumpsuit was torn and scorched, revealing bleeding, deep blue wounds. Her face was streaked with soot. Empress Salith staggered out of the wreckage, her body trembling with shock and exertion. She fell to one knee, breathing heavily. Then, slowly, regally, she forced herself to stand. Her luminous purple eyes, now bright with pain and adrenaline, scanned the room. She saw the posters of anime girls with oversized eyes. She saw the blinking green and blue lights of the water-cooled computer. She saw the pathetic stacks of instant noodle containers. Rowan finally found his voice. He ripped his streaming headset off and threw it on the desk. They stared at each other for a long, silent moment. The alien monarch, conqueror of star systems, the most feared being in the galaxy, and the basement-dwelling coder in a faded t-shirt. Salith spoke first. Her voice was a low, guttural vibration, translated by the damaged but functional tech in her collar into clipped, perfectly regal English. "Where is the tactical command center of this hovel?" Rowan just blinked. The rain was dripping onto his keyboard. "Tactical command, lady. This is my bedroom. And you just voided my security deposit." Salith glared, her expression one of utter confusion and disgust. She tried to take a step toward him, to assert her authority, but she winced, a sharp intake of breath, and leaned against the wall, leaving a smear of cobalt blood on his Void Kraken poster. "I am Empress S," she began, but was cut off. Rowan's monitor, forgotten, suddenly flashed bright red, overriding his streaming software. A Priority 1 planetary alert. The face of Admiral Harlan Pierce, cold and furious, filled the screen. "Attention, citizens of the Terran Alliance," Pierce's voice boomed, rattling Rowan's speakers. "Moments ago, the high-value Nairi prisoner, Salith, escaped from Aegis Spire. Her vessel was damaged and is believed to have crashed in the Neo-London sector. This is a planetary lockdown." The image changed to a rotating 3D model of the very being standing 5 feet away from him. "She is extremely dangerous," Pierce continued. "She is a known psionic entity. Any citizen providing aid or shelter will be prosecuted for high treason. Report any sighting immediately." Outside his window, the city, which was never quiet, erupted in a new kind of noise. Sirens, hundreds of them, converging on his district. Searchlights from airborne patrols cut through the rain, sweeping across the rooftops. Rowan looked at the screen. He looked at Salith, who was now watching the broadcast with an expression of pure, unadulterated hatred. He felt the old, familiar anger swell up in his chest. Neri, the reason Liam was dead, the monster. Here she was. He could be a hero. He could make one call and it would be over. He could get justice for his brother. He looked at the face of Admiral Pierce on the screen, the same man whose sanitized reports he had been reading for 2 years. The same man whose official story about Liam's patrol never added up. The same man who was now demanding his obedience on penalty of treason. Salith met his gaze. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and desperate. She saw his hesitation. She saw the conflict. She pushed herself off the wall, ignoring her injuries, and drew herself up to her full, imposing height. "Make your choice, human," she whispered, her voice rasping. "Serve your masters or dare to see the truth." Rowan looked at the massive, smoking hole in his ceiling. He looked at the treason warning on his monitor. He looked at the most wanted being in the galaxy, who was bleeding cobalt blue all over his floor. He let out a long, slow sigh. This was going to be so much paperwork. He walked past her, his heart pounding his ribs. He did not go to his comlink. He went to the window, and with a sharp tug, he pulled the thin, cheap blinds closed, plunging the room into the dim glow of his computer monitors. He turned back and grabbed his favorite hoodie, the one with the faded, pixelated skull and crossbones logo of his Void Kraken mod, from the back of his chair. He tossed it to her. Salith caught it, surprised. "Put this on," Rowan Blake said, his voice flat. "Your armor is loud, and try not to bleed on the motherboard. That stuff is expensive." The tiny room was thick with the smell of ozone, plaster dust, and the metallic tang of Salith's cobalt blood. Outside, the sirens of Neo-London's security forces built into a screaming, converging wall of sound. The rain hammered against the windows and dripped through the new, jagged skylight Rowan had not asked for. Salith clutched the hoodie he had tossed her. It was made of some soft, pathetically flimsy plant fiber, dyed black, with a crude, mocking image of a skull composed of digital blocks. She held it away from her body as if it were diseased. "This," she stated, her voice a low vibration of disgust, "is what you offer an Empress Rowan, high on adrenaline and the sheer, pants-wetting terror of the situation, found his footing in sarcasm. He jabbed a finger toward the ruined half of his room. "My apologies, Your Highness. The guest suite is currently undergoing unplanned renovations, and frankly, you're tracking scorched pod goo all over my floor." Salith's purple eyes narrowed. She scanned the tiny, cluttered space. This was where the human lived. It was not a room. It was a storage container. Wires snaked across the floor like parasitic vines, connecting glowing boxes of all sizes. Strange. Inert figurines of exaggerated warriors and large-eyed maidens stood frozen on dusty shelves. The air was heavy with the smell of old food, synthetic caffeine, and uncirculated air. It was, she decided, the most undignified place in the known galaxy. "You will be silent," she commanded, trying to draw on the imperial authority that had commanded armies. "You will contact your superiors and inform them that I, Empress Salith, claim this domicile under Neri sovereign protection." Rowan actually laughed. It was a short, sharp, incredulous bark. "Sovereign protection, lady. The only authority in this room is the 300-page lease agreement I have with the Covenant Stack Housing Corporation, and you just voided it, spectacularly. They're probably going to charge me for the ceiling." The absurdity of the moment seemed to deflate her. The adrenaline that had carried her from the Aegis Spire was fading, and the pain was setting in. She winced, her hand flying to a deep, blue-black gash on her side, where a piece of shrapnel from the pod's console had torn through her jumpsuit. Her blood was dark, the color of a deep ocean trench. Rowan's sarcasm died. He saw the wound and the flicker of very real, very non-imperial pain in her eyes. The anger about Liam, the propaganda, the war, it was all still there, a hot knot in his stomach. But this was just a person bleeding in his apartment, a person who, if found, would be dragged out and executed, and he would be executed right alongside her for harboring her. "Damn it," he muttered. He crossed the room, stepping over the smoking debris of his bed, and yanked open a drawer beneath his desk. He pulled out a standard, civilian-grade medkit. "Turn around!" Salith flinched as he approached, her hand moving with defensive speed, but the motion only tore the wound further. She hissed, leaning against the wall. "Do not touch me, human." "Look, I'm not a fan of this either," Rowan snapped, pulling out a spray can of antiseptic foam and a roll of synth flesh bandages. "But you're leaking, and if one of those security drones has a biological sniffer, your sovereign protection is going to get us both shot." "My physiology is self-healing," she said, through gritted teeth. She closed her eyes, trying to focus, to enter the shallow healing trance of her people. But her psionic abilities were still fractured. The collar, though damaged, was still suppressing the finer control, and her body was in profound shock. The wound continued to seep blood. She glared at the medkit. "Your primitive tools are insufficient." "They're what I've got," Rowan said, his patience gone. "It's either this or you bleed out behind my anime posters. Your choice." For a long, tense moment, she stared at him, her pride warring with the cold, pragmatic truth. Finally, with an almost imperceptible nod, she turned, bracing herself against the wall. He was as gentle as he could be, which wasn't very. He sprayed the antiseptic foam directly onto the gash. Salith let out a strangled cry, her entire body going rigid. The foam sizzled as it neutralized the alien bacteria in her blood. "Your methods are barbaric," she breathed, her forehead pressed against the wall. "Yeah. Well, my advanced xenomedical bay is in the shop," Rowan muttered, mimicking his earlier complaint. He took the synth flesh patch and carefully applied it over the wound, pressing the edges down until it sealed. It was a crude fix, But the bleeding slowed, then stopped. He repeated the process on 2 smaller cuts on her arm. "It will hold," he said, stepping back and stuffing the used supplies into a disposal bag. "For now." Salith turned slowly. She looked exhausted, and the pain had hollowed out her features, making her look less like a monarch and more like a refugee. "This," she said, her voice quiet, "was not an accident." Rowan paused, the disposal bag in his hand. "What crashing through my ceiling, I'd really prefer to think so." "The escape," she clarified, her eyes distant. "The power surge on the spire. Easy access to the escape bay. It was facilitated." She looked at him, her gaze sharp and analytical, as if seeing him for the first time. "The ambush at Cygnus, where I was captured. My flagship's shields failed at a tactical juncture they should have held. I believe there is a traitor in my court, someone who wanted me captured by your alliance." Rowan processed this. It was a complex idea, and it ran completely counter to the propaganda. The news feeds claimed the capture was a triumph of human strategy and courage. Salith was suggesting it was a fixed fight. "A traitor," Rowan repeated, non-committally. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you did not call your masters," Salith said simply. "You chose this. You chose to hide me. That makes you either a fool or a traitor to your own kind. I am hoping you are simply a fool who questions." Rowan gave another short laugh. "Right now, I'm leaning heavily toward fools." He gestured to his computer setup. "Sit. The chair's clean. Don't touch anything." Salith eyed his high-backed, ergonomic gaming chair as if it were a pile of filth. But the only other option was the floor. She sat, her regal posture looking utterly ridiculous in the context of the neon-lit command center of a professional gamer. Rowan, meanwhile, turned to his console. The planetary alert from Pierce was still looping on one screen. He muted it. "Okay, let's see what the world thinks is going on." He brought up his work terminal. His Level 2 credentials were a joke in the grand scheme of the military, but they gave him access to the unmonitored, internal-facing service portals. He wasn't a hacker, not really. He was just the guy who knew where the digital backdoors were left unlocked. He pulled up the public news feeds first. It was exactly what he expected. Salith's face was everywhere, but it wasn't her face. It was a doctored image, her features subtly warped to look more predatory, her eyes glowing a demonic red instead of their luminous purple. The headline screamed, "The Noiri monster is loose. Alien butcher escapes. Lock your doors. Report. Obey." He glanced over his shoulder at the monster in his chair. She was watching his screen, her expression a mask of cold fury. She was wearing his hoodie now, having finally pulled it on over her torn jumpsuit. The pixelated skull logo was stretched taut across her shoulders. The sleeves were too short for her long arms. "They portray me as a beast," she said quietly. "That's propaganda," Rowan said, turning back to the screen. "It's how this works. You're the big bad evil. We're the plucky heroes. Simplifies the narrative. Sells war bonds." "It is effective," she conceded. "Yeah. Well, let's see what they're not saying." He dived deeper, into the internal network logs, for the Neo-London security grid. He found the converging patrol routes, the drone sweep patterns. They were throwing everything at this. Then, he tried to access the Aegis Spire's internal logs. Specifically, the engineering reports from the time of the escape. Access denied. Classification level, Pierce Omega. Rowan frowned. "That's weird." "What?" Salith asked, leaning forward. "The escape logs. They're classified. Not just high level, but personally classified by Admiral Pierce. No one sees them but him. Why would you do that?" An escape is an embarrassment, sure, but you don't black hole the data unless you're hiding how it happened. He looked at Salith. You said it was facilitated. You might be right. His mind was racing. This connected to his own private investigation. The same pattern. Pierce's name. Black hole data. The official report on his brother Liam's death was also locked under a similar, if less severe, classification. A standard killed in action report shouldn't be classified like that. He felt the old, familiar grief twist in his gut. He looked at Salith, and the image of his brother's smiling face in his pilot's uniform flashed in his mind. He wanted to hate her. It was her people, her war. My brother, he said, his voice suddenly hard, was killed by one of your ships, vaporized. His flight wing was sacrificed. That's what the data I found suggests. Your people did that. Salith met his gaze. There was no apology in her eyes, no pity, just a cold, weary understanding. War is the exchange of tragedies, humans. Your species fired the first shot in the Orion Spur. You call us monsters, but your fleets practice strategic orbital bombardment on civilian colonies. My war was one of defense. Save it, Rowan snapped, turning away. Save the Imperial spin. I don't care who started it. Liam's dead. And you're here. The universe has a sick sense of humor. There was a long silence, broken only by the distant rain and sirens. I see his loss in your mind, Salith said, her voice softer. Rowan stiffened. What get out of my head? I am not in your head, she said, sounding tired. The collar is damaged. It no longer dampens, but it scrambles. But your emotions are so loud. This grief, it's chaotic. It resonates. I did not kill your brother, Rowan Blake, but I understand the shape of his loss. Rowan's anger deflated, leaving him feeling hollow. He hated this. He hated that she wasn't the one-dimensional monster from the posters. It made his quest for revenge complicated. If the Neri weren't the only monsters, who did he blame? His own command, Pierce. The silence stretched, becoming awkward. Salith's stomach growled. It was a low, alien rumble, but unmistakable. Rowan sighed. Are you hungry? Salith looked indignant. My nutritional needs are not your concern. Her stomach growled again, louder this time. Rowan rolled his eyes. He went to his small food replicator, tapped the keypad, and a small, steaming cup of synthetic noodles materialized. He slid it across the desk to her. It's Nutriplex. Chickenish flavor. It's hot, and it's got calories. Eat or starve. Your choice. Salith stared at the cup as if he had handed her a living insect. She poked the gelatinous noodles with a flimsy plastic fork. She had dined on refined energy nectars and meats from creatures that hunted in the nebulae of her home system. This was paste. She looked at Rowan, who was watching her with a morbid curiosity. She looked at the tiny, cluttered room that was her only refuge. With a sigh of profound, imperial humiliation, Empress Salith, ruler of the Nairi Star Empire, took a bite of instant noodles. It was salty, and not terrible. She ate in silence, the act of profound surrender. She was dependent on this nerd, this data gremlin, as her people would call him, a low-caste human who lived in a box and ate paste. Her entire life, she had been defined by her strength, her psionic power, her absolute authority. Now, she had none of those. She was just a fugitive. She had to adapt. The survival instinct that had made her people a spacefaring empire took over. These patrols, she said, setting the empty cup down with careful dignity. You said they are sweeping the building. Yeah, Rowan said, monitoring the network logs. They're moving slowly, though. This stack is huge, 500,000 people. They're going block by block, floor by floor. We've got maybe 12 hours before they're at our door. How do we evade them? She asked. It was the first time she had asked him for anything, not commanded. Rowan almost smiled. The power dynamic had shifted. Okay, here's the plan, Your Highness. First, you stop calling yourself Empress, or we. It's weird, and it'll kill us. Second, you stay away from the window. Third, if anyone does see you, you're my cousin. My weird, tall cosplay cousin. I'm from Sweden. Salith's glare could have melted the bulkhead. Cosplay. You dress up as fictional characters. See? He pointed to the poster of Galactic Gun Priestess Asuna. You're just really into it. Got it. I will not, she began. But Rowan cut her off. You will. Or you'll be explaining it to a firing squad. They will not care about your imperial sensibilities. Salith clamped her jaw shut. She nodded. One sharp, angry move. Hours passed. The adrenaline of the crash and the escape wore off, leaving them both exhausted. The sirens faded to a dull, constant hum. The city was in gridlock. Rowan worked, his fingers flying across his keyboard, creating backdoor protocols, spoofing his apartment's energy signature, trying to digitally erase them from the building's census. Salith watched him. She had grown bored of sitting, and her natural curiosity, long suppressed by imperial protocol, began to surface. She watched the lines of code scroll past on his screen. Your logic patterns are chaotic, she observed. Gee, thanks, Rowan muttered, not looking up. But they are effective, she continued. You build things from nothing. Her gaze moved from his screen to the custom-built PC rig beside him. It was a Frankenstein's monster of technology, a military-grade cooling system jury-rigged to a civilian processor, powered by a scavenged server farm battery. My people, we refine. We perfect what exists. We do not invent from refuse. This is stubbornness. To force technology to work against its intended design. It is uniquely human. Rowan stopped typing. He looked at her, surprised by the genuine curiosity in her voice. This was the humanity, fuck yeah moment his forum mates were always talking about. They saw human grit and creativity as a superpower. It's called salvaging, he said. Or, more accurately, being poor. You take the trash other people throw away, and you make it work. A strange, unfamiliar impulse struck him. He wanted to show her. He wanted to impress her, not as an empress, but as someone who understood creation. You want to see chaotic but effective, he asked, toggling one of his screens. He launched his passion project, The Void Kraken's Lair VR mod. Try this. He pulled his spare neural headset from a drawer. It was an older model, clunky, with a few cracks in the casing. He handed it to her. Salith took it, examining the simple interface. A simulation. A game, Rowan corrected. A world. I built this level. From scratch. She hesitated, then put the headset on. Rowan jerked into his own console, booting up the game in God mode so he could guide her. In virtual space, they stood on the deck of a pirate shipwreck, lodged in the glowing, bioluminescent ribs of a long-dead space monster. The Void Kraken. At first, Salith was clumsy. Her avatar stumbled. The controls are imprecise. Don't use the controls, Rowan said, his voice in her virtual ear. Just be... It's a neural headset. It reads intent. Salith closed her eyes in the real world. In the virtual world, her avatar still went. Then, she felt it. Her damaged, scrambled psionic senses, suppressed by the collar, found a new medium, the code. She could feel the edges of the simulation, the logic paths, the intent Rowan had programmed into the world. Her avatar moved. It didn't walk. It flowed. She moved with a speed and grace Rowan had never programmed. She was feeling the game, not just playing it. "I can feel it," she whispered, her real-world voice filled with awe. "The structure, the thought behind physics. This is art, in its own crude, human way." They stayed in the simulation for an hour. He showed her the glitches he was proud of, the backdoors he had coded. She, in turn, showed him how she could bend his rules, using her psionic echo to interact with the code in ways he'd never thought possible. A strange, profound respect formed between them, the shared understanding of two builders. They were pulled out of it by a flashing red light on Rowan's console. A priority alert. He ripped his headset off. "Shit." Salith pulled hers off, the real world crashing back in. "What is it?" "Thermal sweep. Sector 44 Delta. That's us. Right now." As if on cue, a heavy, metallic thrum vibrated through the walls. A large, 8-rotored security drone, the size of a small car, drifted into view outside his window. Its single, ominous red optical sensor began to sweep back and forth, bathing his apartment in crimson light. "They are scanning floor by floor," Rowan whispered, his blood running cold. "They're looking for heat signatures and anomalous energy." "They will detect me," Salith said, her voice flat. "My life signs are non-human. My energy signature, even suppressed, is different." "Not if I get there first," Rowan said. His eyes were intense, focused. This was it. He didn't grab his keyboard. He reached behind his head, his fingers finding the small, hidden port at the base of his skull. He grabbed the custom interface cable he kept hidden in his desk and, with a sharp hiss, jammed it into the port. Salith's eyes widened. Rowan's world dissolved. He wasn't in his room anymore. He was on Covenant Stack's network. He was a ghost in the machine. He felt the building's ancient, creaking infrastructure. He felt the hum of 10,000 cheap air conditioners, the thrum of the maglev trains in the sublevels, and he felt the intruder, the drone. The drone's sensor sweep hit his apartment. It sent a query packet to the building's central hub. "Report Unit 14B. Life signs. Energy output." Rowan intercepted the packet. He didn't just hack it. He became the network. He felt the drone's sensors brush against his apartment. He felt his own heat signature at the desk. And he felt her. Salith's energy was a faint, warm, complex thrum of psionic power, utterly alien and as bright as a beacon to the drone's sensors. With a surge of concentration, Rowan grabbed her energy signature in the data stream. He wrapped it in a layer of digital noise. He disguised it, masked it, and digitally shoved it inside the thermal signature of his overclocked, water-cooled PC rig. He made it look like his computer was just a faulty, power-hungry piece of junk to the drone. The query came back: Unit 14B. Life signs 1. Human, male. Anomalous energy high. Consistent with server-grade hardware malfunction. Flag for maintenance. No NIRI signature detected. The red light swept over his window one last time and moved on. The thrum faded as it ascended to the next floor. Rowan ripped the cable from his port, collapsing back into his chair, gasping. The world slammed back into focus. A thin trickle of blood ran from his nose. Salith was staring at him, her eyes wide with a new, profound shock. She had felt him, when his mind had shielded hers in the data stream. She had felt his consciousness, a chaotic, brilliant, stubborn human will touch hers. "What are you?" she whispered. Rowan wiped the blood from his lip, his voice shaky but trying for nonchalance. "I'm just an IT guy." The immediate danger had passed, but the air in the room was electric. The pretense was gone. He wasn't just a nerd, and she wasn't just a refugee. They were two highly dangerous individuals, trapped in a box, with a shared secret. Salith rose from the gaming chair. The power dynamic had shifted again, but this time to one of equals. "You are not what you seem, Rowan Blake," she said. "Neither are you." "Your Highness," he countered, his breathing evening out. "You're not the monster from the posters." The dam of pretense broke. They talked. He told her, really told her, about Liam. Not just the anger, but the gnawing, obsessive need to know the truth. She, in turn, told him everything. She named her cousin, Regent Kalar. She explained the ambush, the convenient shield failure, the accidental escape. "He wants me dead," Salith stated, her voice cold as the void. "But he cannot be seen as a regicide. It would shatter his claim to the throne. He needed me to be captured, or killed, by you, by humans." Rowan's blood ran cold. "The man on the broadcast, Pierce. He is Kalar's ally," Salith affirmed. "I am certain of it. They staged my capture. They staged my escape. And they will stage my death. They are working together. They want me gone, Rowan Blake, so they can unite our peoples under a new, shared tyranny. And they will use my martyrdom to do it." It all clicked. The black hole data, Pierce's personal classification, Liam's sacrificial patrol. It was all part of the same, rotten system. His private search for justice for his brother, and her imperial predicament were the same fight. He was no longer just a nerd hiding an alien. He was a variable in an interstellar conspiracy. Salith stepped closer to him. The 2-foot height difference was still imposing, but her expression was no longer one of command. It was an alliance. "Help me," she said, her voice low and intense. "You have the skills. You have the access. You are invisible to them. Help me find the proof. Help me survive. And help me return to my people." Rowan looked at her, at the alien Empress wearing his old hoodie. His quest for revenge was no longer simple. It wasn't us versus them. It was us versus them. The ones at the top. The ones who drew the maps and sacrificed the pawns like Liam. "Help me," Salith repeated. "And I swear on the first star, I will end this war. Not a pause. Not a ceasefire. An end. I will open a full, independent investigation into the actions of both our governments. From the first shot at Orion to your brother, we will have accountability." It was an unprecedented, revolutionary promise from a Nairi Empress. Rowan looked at Liam's photo on his desk. He still wanted revenge. He wanted it so badly it tasted like acid in his throat. But now, that revenge had a face. It was Kalar. It was Pierce. It was the whole damn system that fed on people like him and his brother. He nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. "Fine," Rowan said, his voice quiet but firm. "I'll help you. We'll find the truth. We'll stop them." He agreed to her terms, to the grand, noble pursuit of accountability. But as he shook her 3-fingered hand, sealing the most bizarre alliance in human history, he made a second, private vow. "And when I find the man who gave the order that killed Liam, I will burn him to the ground." He did not share that part with her. The shaky alliance had lasted for 3 days. 3 days of Rowan living with a fugitive Empress, in a room that was shrinking by the hour. The lockdown was total. Neo-London's formidable Bring the Rain security forces, a lovely marketing term for heavily armed urban pacification units, were sweeping the city in an agonizingly slow, methodical grid. Their apartment at Covenant Stack was in the middle of the search quadrant. They had, by Rowan's calculation, less than 48 hours until Boots were at the door. Cohabitation was a special kind of hell. Salith, deprived of her authority, her attendance, and her entire world, had focused her formidable imperial displeasure on Rowan's lifestyle. "This dust," she would say, running a long, cobalt blue finger along his monitor. is a colony of microorganisms. You are cultivating plague. It's called I'm busy, Rowan retorted from the floor, where he was soldering a new power relay for his PC. And stop analyzing my dust. You're wearing my hoodie. Show some respect for the fabric. This garment, she sniffed, pulling at the pixelated skull hoodie, which she had been forced to wear constantly, is an insult to insulation, and it smells faintly of artificial cheese. That's the smell of freedom, Your Highness. Their truce was built on a shared, desperate need to survive, and it was primarily expressed through high-level, interstellar sarcasm. But beneath the bickering, a grudging respect was forming. She was, he had to admit, terrifyingly smart. And he was, she conceded, infuriatingly resourceful. The outside world, however, was not content to leave them to their cultural exchange program. Propaganda had reached fever pitch. Alliance Media pumped out a constant stream of the Neary Menace programming, encouraging citizens to see something, say something. It was a witch hunt, and Rowan lived in a building full of curtain-twitching busybodies. The inevitable knock at the door came on day 4. It was not the security forces. It was worse. It was Mrs. Petrov from apartment 14A. Rowan froze. Salith, who had been attempting to meditate on the floor, which she had scrubbed clean with one of Rowan's t-shirts, looked up, her expression instantly hardening into one of suspicion. "Who is that?" she whispered. "The neighbor," Rowan hissed, panic flashing in his eyes. "She has a key. She waters my plastic plants when I'm gone." "Don't ask." The knock came again, harder. "Rowan. Honey, are you in there? I heard a crash the other night, and your energy signature has been just wild. Dear, are you running that computer again?" Rowan scrambled to the door, peering through the digital peephole. Mrs. Petrov was a small, round woman, wrapped in a fuzzy pink bathrobe, her face a mask of manufactured concern. "Salith, hide," he whispered frantically. Salith rose to her full, imposing height of nearly 7 feet. "Hide where? In one of your noodle cups? Just get in the corner. Behind the PC rig, look fictional." "What does that mean?" "It means don't look like the alien monster on TV." He took a deep breath and opened the door. Just a crack. "Hey, Mrs. P. Everything's fine. Just a small accident with a shelving unit. You know, klutzy me." Mrs. Petrov's eyes, sharp as microneedles, scanned past him into the dim apartment. She saw the massive, tarp-covered hole in the ceiling. She saw the still smoking wreckage of the pod, which Rowan had tried to disguise as a modern art sculpture. And she saw Salith. The Empress was standing in the darkest corner, partially obscured by the glowing PC rig, stock still, wearing his hoodie. "Rowan," Mrs. Petrov said, her voice dropping. "Who is that? I thought you said you were working." Rowan's mind raced. That's Sarah, my girlfriend. I am from Sweden. She's visiting." Salith's head snapped toward him, her purple eyes flashing with a look that promised a quick and painful death. "Girlfriend, Mrs. Petrov said, unconvinced. "She's very tall, isn't she? And why is she just standing there?" "She's a cosplayer, Mrs. P. You know performance art. She's very methodical. She's visiting for the Neo-London Con, but it got cancelled by the lockdown. She's in character. Right, Sarah." He gave Salith a look of pure, pleading terror. Salith, Empress of the Nairi Star Empire, conqueror of worlds. Understood. She was being asked to perform. She drew herself up, struck a pose she'd once seen on one of his anime posters, and tilted her chin. "I am Galactic Gun Priestess Asuna," Salith announced, her regal, alien voice failing utterly to sound Swedish. "You are a commoner. Be gone. lest you face my photon judgment. Rowan winced so hard his spine cracked. Mrs. Petrov just stared, her jaw slack. Right. Well, you tell your girlfriend to keep the energy surges down. Some of us are trying to watch the news. She backed away, and Rowan slammed the door, locking the deadbolt. He leaned against it, breathing heavily. He turned to Salith, who was still holding her ridiculous pose. Photon judgment, Rowan managed to say. You said to be fictional, Salith said defensively, breaking character. I chose a priestess. It seemed dignified. And you called me your girlfriend. It was either that or escaped alien monarch, Rowan shot back. We are compromised. She's going to report us. Let her, Salith said, her calm returning. She has no proof, only suspicions. We have more immediate concerns than your Mrs. P. She was right. Rowan went back to his terminal. He had to maintain his cover, which meant he still had to perform his low-level IT job. He logged into the Alliance network to clear his queue of maintenance tickets. Muse, he said on air. Load my work queue. A cheerful, synthesized female voice chimed from his desktop speakers. Right away, Captain. You have oh dear 12 tickets, mostly salty coffee complaints from logistics. How dreadful, Salith looked around. Who is Muse? Is there another human hiding in this box? It's my personal AI, Rowan explained, typing. A little custom-coded assistant. She runs my apartment's smart systems. She's simple, but she organizes my calendar. Muse, run diagnostics on that power grid flicker at the Sector 7 supply depot. Aye, aye, Captain, Muse chirped. Salith watched him, her head tilted. She calls you Captain. A little ego boost, Rowan said quietly. Then, his voice dropping so low only he could be heard, he subvocalized, Muse, Sub-Protocol 117, Deep Search active, Cross-reference, Pierce, Harlan. Kaler, Regent, and Aegis Spire containment failure. The AI's public voice remained cheerful. Running diagnostics now, Captain. This may take a moment. Why don't I play some calming neo-jazz? No, Muse. Just run the diagnostic. Salith watched the interaction, her sharp eyes missing nothing. She sensed the second layer, the command beneath the command. Rowan worked on the salty coffee ticket, his credentials giving him access to the depot's network. But in the background, Muse, his simple AI, was not running diagnostics. She was a digital scalpel, slipping through Alliance firewalls, following the threads he had given her. Muse was his greatest secret, a true, sentient AI he had built from scavenged code, hiding behind the mask of a standard, dumb home assistant. After 10 minutes, Muse's voice returned. Oh, goodness me. Captain, I seem to have tripped. Rowan's fingers stopped. What do you mean? Muse? Well, while I was fixing that power grid issue, your diagnostic script seems to have caused a cascading permission error in a classified Alliance RD directory. A file, well, it just sort of fell into my open partition. It looks like a project manifest. It's all very boring. Lots of science. Shall I delete it? No, Muse, Rowan said, his heart hammering. Don't delete it. Just show me. A file window opened on his private monitor. Project Harmony Net. Classification, Pierce Omega. Salith, he said, his voice suddenly tight. You need to see this. She was at his shoulder in an instant. They read the file together. It was not a weapon. Not in the traditional sense. It was a theoretical infrastructure. A bioneural psionic interface designed to link the minds of two entire species. It spoke of permanent conflict resolution and voluntary alignment of will. And it was all centered on her. They have my genetic profile, Salith whispered, pointing to a line of code. From my capture. They are using it as the master key for the Neri side of the network. It's worse than that, Rowan said, scrolling down to the technical annex. It's not just your DNA. It needs your psionic signature. A living, active matrix. He pointed to a line. They need to map your consciousness. The project notes state, optimum data acquisition will occur at the moment of psionic dissolution. That means death. Your death. It all snapped into focus. Kalar's betrayal. Pierce's cooperation. The accidental escape. This is their plan, Rowan said, his voice sick. This is the shared project Kalar mentioned. They lure you into an escape. Then Pierce hunts you down and kills you, all while Kalar's people are scanning your mind as it dies. Pierce gets his weapon, Kalar gets his throne, and they unite both species by turning us all into puppets. Salith stepped back from the screen, her expression one of utter, cold horror. This is not war. This is extermination, not of the body, but of the self. As the weight of the revelation settled on them, Rowan was struck by a sudden, piercing headache. It was a spike of pure, white-hot agony behind his right eye. He cried, his hand flying to his temple. "Rowan," Salith asked, startled. My implant," he gasped, leaning back in his chair. At the same moment, Salith staggered, her hand clutching the damaged psionic collar. "Feedback I feel." Rowan's vision swam. For a second, he wasn't in his room. He was in a vast, crystalline chamber, looking up at a throne of living obsidian. He felt a wave of regal certainty. Salith, in turn, stumbled, overwhelmed by a sudden, chaotic rush of greasy food, the smell of rain, and a deep, aching, hollow grief for a man named Liam. They both recoiled, breaking the contact. "Get out of my head!" Rowan yelled, pushing his chair. "You intruded on me!" Salith shot back, breathing heavily. They stared at each other, confused and terrified. "What was that?" Rowan asked. Salith's eyes scanned the room, searching for the source. Her gaze landed on the wall near Rowan's desk, right where the pod had struck. A small, dark shard of the Neri console, no bigger than his thumb, was embedded in the plaster. It was pulsing, with a faint, almost invisible purple light, an energy echo from the pod's core. "The fragment," she breathed. "It is amplifying. The crash embedded a piece of my ship's psionic core into your wall." Rowan looked at the fragment, then at the neural port at the base of his own skull. He had been leaning his head right next to it. "My implant, it's a receiver. The fragment is a transmitter. And you." "I am a beacon," she finished, her expression horrified. "Your proximity, combined with our heightened emotional state, created a temporary, uncontrolled psionic bridge. I felt your memories. And I saw your throne room," Rowan said, rubbing his temples. The intimacy of the violation was sickening. "Your feelings are sharp and cold." "And yours are oily," she retorted, disgusted. "And loud, so loud. You must stay away from that fragment. We cannot risk that happening again. If we can feel each other, anyone scanning this sector might feel us." The Harmony Net file was still open on his screen. A ticking time bomb. "We can't do this alone," Rowan said, forcing his mind to focus. "This file, it's beyond me. It mentions bioneural protocols, psionic harmonic resonance. It's a fusion of human and Neri tech. We need an expert." "Who?" "Dr. Mira Halden," Rowan said, the name flashing in his mind from the file's signatory list. "She was on the project, the ethicist. She resigned 3 months ago." "She is in hiding," Salith stated. "Or she is dead." "Muse," Rowan commanded. "Find Dr. Mira Halden. She resigned from Alliance RD. Find her." "Searching," Muse chirped. "Oh, she is quite gone. Captain." Her files are redacted. Her finances are frozen. She is nowhere. Cross-reference her known associates with anonymous data haven traffic in the last 6 months, Rowan ordered, his voice rapid. Look for access patterns matching academic research, specifically bioethics. Look for a guilty conscience. Parsing, oh. There, Muse said. An anonymous user account. Logging in from the Neo-London University Public Archive. Accessing, my lots of philosophy texts. And deep-level psionics theory. The user's handle is Cassandra. That's her, Rowan said. He couldn't risk a public call. He had to go digital. He grabbed his neural interface cable. Rowan, what are you doing? Salith warned. The link. I'm not linking to you. I'm linking to the net. Muse. Secure a one-time channel. Bounce it through 3 different continents. I'm going in. He jacked into his port. The world vanished in a rush of data. Through Muse's guidance, he plunged into the matrix, emerging in a dark, text-only data haven. He found the user, Cassandra. He opened a text prompt. Dr. Halden, I have a coffee machine problem. The reply was almost instantaneous. I don't know who you are. Leave me alone. The coffee is salty. It's a logistics problem. A pause. This was a long shot. I don't service that depot anymore. Rowan took the gamble. Project. Harmony. Net. The text channel was silent for a full 30 seconds. You are a dead man. Who is this? How did you get this channel? I'm a level 2 tech who found a file. You resigned over this? They're building it, aren't they? And I think they have the key. Delete the file. Burn the drive. Run. They will kill you for even knowing. Rowan looked at Salith, who was watching his face intently. He opened his mic on the secure channel. Doctor, he said. Salith understood. She leaned over his desk. Dr. Mira Halden. Salith's regal voice cut through the channel, cold and precise. They do not just have the key. I am the key. There was a choked sound from the other end. Mira Halden appeared on his monitor via a grainy, unsecured video feed. She was a woman in her 50s, her face lined with fear and exhaustion. It cannot be, Mira whispered, staring at Salith. Empress Salith, you're alive, Pierce said. Pierce lies, Salith said. They're going to activate it, Mira said, her voice cracking. The orbital platform. The Nexus. They're moving up the timeline. They're waiting for confirmation of your death. And then they'll, oh, God, they'll flip the switch. Before they could respond, Muse's voice cut in, this time loud, overriding all his speakers. Captain Planetary Broadcast, Priority 1. Admiral Pierce's face filled Rowan's main screen, looking stern and sorrowful. But he was not alone. Standing beside him, in shimmering hologram form, was Regent Kalar. It is with profound sorrow, Kalar announced, his oily, translated voice filling the small apartment, that I must confirm the death of my cousin, Empress Salith. She was killed tragically during a violent, misguided escape attempt from Alliance custody. Rowan looked at Salith. She was completely, terrifyingly still. Her face was a mask of pale stone. Kalar continued. Her tragic zealotry, her refusal of peace, led to this end, but her passing clears the way for a new era, an era of harmony, a new partnership with the Terran Alliance, to ensure such needless conflict never rises again. The broadcast ended. The room was silent. A single, hot tear of pure, incandescent rage rolled down Salith's cheek. The lights in Rowan's apartment exploded. The monitors sparked and died. The only light came from the glowing purple Nairi fragment in the wall, which was now pulsing with a furious, bright light. He is erasing me, Salith whispered, her voice a low, lethal vibration. He dances on my grave while I am still breathing. He is taking my throne with a lie. The rage was so potent, so focused, that Rowan felt it himself, a hot spike of betrayal, even without the neural link. "Okay," Rowan said, his voice shaking, but his resolve hardening into steel. "Forget hiding. Forget running. We're taking them down." He rebooted his system, the monitors flickering back to life on emergency power. Mira Halden was still in line, her face pale. "He's made his move," Mira said. "They'll activate the Harmony Net. They'll use this tragedy as the excuse. They'll unite the species in shared grief. We have days, maybe hours." "How do we stop it?" Rowan asked. "The Nexus," Mira said. "The control station. It's in high orbit. You'd have to destroy it." "How do I get up there?" Rowan said. "I'm a level 2 tech. I can't even get a good parking space." "Captain," Muse's voice chimed in, calm and logical now, her dumb persona gone. "There is a technical maintenance roster for the Nexus platform. A level 4 diagnostic is scheduled in 2 days. The assigned technician, a Mr. Elias Thorne, has unfortunately a severe, documented allergy to replicated atmospheric scrubbers. It's inconvenient for him." A cold, terrible smile spread across Rowan's face. "Muse. Find out what Mr. Thorne is having for dinner tonight, and make sure it gives him a violent stomachache." "Right away, Captain." "I'll take his credentials. I'll be the new maintenance tech," Rowan said, the plan forming with desperate speed. "Mira, you can be our voice outside. Guide us through the system." "But you," Mira said, looking at Salith. "Empress, you are the most wanted being in the galaxy. You're cobalt blue." Salith looked at Rowan. Then she looked at the glowing Neri fragment in the wall, the accidental, dangerous bridge. "I am going with him," she stated. Rowan recoiled. "What? No. Absolutely not. I am not smuggling you onto a high-security military base in a duffel bag." "Not in a bag," Salith said, her eyes locking onto his neural port. "In you, the link. It is a terrible risk, but it is the only way. I cannot go physically, but if you are the host, I can hide my consciousness inside yours. I can hitchhike." "Get in my head!" Rowan was horrified. "No, no way. That's worse than the neighbor." "It is theoretically possible," Mira interjected, her mind racing. "His implant is a receiver. Her psionic nature is a transmitter. Rowan, your brain is already hybridized from those experiments. You might be the only human in existence who could survive it. But Salith is right. It is a terrible risk. If you are caught, they won't just kill you. They will unravel you. Both of you. A human mind isn't built to house a Neri consciousness." This was it. The plan. Insane. Suicidal. And the only option they had. Muse would get Rowan the credentials. Mira would be their guide. Rowan would be the vessel. Salith would be the passenger. The night before the infiltration, the tiny apartment was silent. The rain had stopped. The city outside seemed to be holding its breath. Rowan sat at his desk, staring at the small, faded photo of his brother. Liam, taped to the monitor. Salith, sensing his mood, stood near the window, looking out at the city lights. The faint, passive link between them was thrumming, a low-key awareness of each other's emotional state. "You are thinking of him," she said. It was not a question. "Yeah. This Kalar. This Pierce. They are what you hate now, the ones you seek vengeance against." Rowan was quiet for a long time. He shook his head slowly. "I thought so," he said, his voice low. "I thought this was all about revenge for Liam. But sitting here, listening to them talk about harmony by deleting free will, I don't know who I hate anymore. Salith." He turned in his chair to face her. The faint light from his monitors cast him in blue and green. "I'm not even sure I hate you anymore," he admitted. "And you. I think I just hate the war. I hate the whole stupid, broken machine. The one that took my brother. What made your cousin a traitor? The one that put you, the Empress of everything, in my tiny, stupid bedroom." He had finally said it. He was no longer a nerd playing a revenge game. He was a man who had seen the real enemy, and it was the system itself. Salith looked at him. The usual imperial pride in her eyes was gone, replaced by something new, a strange, startling respect. She saw the human, Rowan Blake, not as a tool, or a servant, or a data gremlin. She saw him as an equal. "Then we will break the machine," she said, her voice quiet but absolute. "Together, or we will die trying." The air in the tiny apartment crackled with a new, terrifying energy. The plan was insane, and it was happening now. Muse had been devastatingly efficient. Mr. Elias Thorne, the Level 4 technician, had indeed consumed a seafood pasta laced with a potent, synthesized allergen. He was currently, as Muse cheerfully reported, experiencing catastrophic gastrointestinal distress in a low-level medical bay. His credentials, his security clearances, and his shuttle pass were now digitally flagged as active and on-site. The hardest part was the link. Rowan sat on the floor, his back against the wall, his neural interface cable in his hand. Salith sat opposite him, cross-legged, her eyes closed in concentration. The small, purple Nairi fragment was pulsed with a steady, low light. "Once we are linked," Salith instructed, her voice calm and cold, "you must remain in control. I will be a passenger. I will see what you see, hear what you hear. But my thoughts will be in your mind. Do not let them overwhelm your own." "Right. Easy," Rowan said, his hand shaking. "Just a 7-foot alien Empress hitchhiking in my brain. What could go wrong?" "Everything," she said, opening her luminous purple eyes. "Which is why you must not fail. Do it." Rowan took a deep, shuddering breath and jammed the cable into the port at the base of his skull. The world did not vanish. Instead, it doubled. He felt a sudden, agonizing pressure, as if his mind, a small, cramped room, had just had a palace dropped into it. He gasped. His own consciousness recollected. "This is your mind." The voice was not a sound. It was a thought, and it was not his. It was Salith, and she sounded appalled. It is so loud, chaotic, full of pictures of cats, and fear. So much fear. "Shut up," Rowan projected back, his own thoughts feeling small and defensive. "It's my mind. I'll clutter it if I want. And stop looking at my cat memes." He staggered to his feet. His body felt heavy, his limbs slightly out of sync. He was seeing his apartment through his own eyes, but also, simultaneously, through hers. She saw the world with a painful, analytical clarity, cataloging everything as a threat or a tool. The whole experience was profoundly nauseating. "Dr. Halden, Muse. Are you there?" Rowan said aloud, his voice sounding strange to his own doubled hearing. "We are here, Rowan." Mira Halden's voice came over his comlink. "The channel is secure. Muse is running interference. The transport shuttle leaves in 10 minutes. You are now Elias Thorne. Get moving." The shuttle ride was agony. Rowan, now Elias Thorne, sat strapped into a cramped transport seat, surrounded by bored, heavily armed Alliance Marines. He was sweating, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. "Your cardiovascular system is erratic," Salith observed from inside his skull. "These Marines, they are large, but they are unfocused. Their minds are soft, thinking of wages and a game." "Void Kraken's lair." Stop scanning them," Rowan thought. terrified. "You're going to set off an alarm. Just look at the floor. Be quiet. Try. I don't know. Hum. It's a human thing. Just be small." "I do not know how to be small," she replied, insulted. The shuttle docked with a heavy, metallic thud. The doors hissed open. "Harmony Nexus," the pilot's voice crackled. "Tech crews, disembark. Welcome to the future." Rowan stepped out into the station. It was nothing like the grim, military gray of the Aegis Spire. The Harmony Nexus was beautiful and terrifying. It was all white, polished surfaces, glowing blue light strips and vast, open spaces. It felt less like a military base and more like a cathedral, dedicated to some cold, sterile god. He moved through the corridors, his borrowed credentials flashing green at every checkpoint. No one looked at him twice. He was just Elias, the tech with the bad allergies, here to run a diagnostic. "The architecture," Salith commented, her voice dripping with disdain. "It is offensive. All hard lines and right angles. They build like blunt force trauma. There is no flow, no harmony with the energy of the space. They're human." "Your Highness," Rowan thought back, his sarcasm a flimsy shield for his terror. "We build with spreadsheets and lowest bidder contracts. Now, quiet. I'm trying to look convincingly under the weather." He was directed to the Nexus command hub, and his blood ran cold. Admiral Harlan Pierce was there, in person. He was standing on a low dais, addressing a room full of high-level officers. He looked exactly as he did on the broadcasts, imposing, immovable, his face carved from granite. Rowan tried to slide by, just a low-level tech, but the doors were sealed for the briefing. He was trapped. "The future of humanity," Pierce was saying, his voice a low, confident rumble that filled the sterile space, "has always been defined by its willingness to evolve. We defeated the Nairi war machine by evolving our tactics. Now, we will defeat war itself by evolving our will." He gestured to the vast holographic display behind him, which showed the intertwining neural lattices of the Harmony Net. "This is not a weapon of subjugation," Pierce lied, his voice resonating with absolute conviction. "It is a tool of peace. It will link our two peoples. It will make us understand, empathize. It will remove the concept of conflict. Tomorrow, when we activate this network, we will be ending war forever." Rowan had to stand there, holding his toolkit, and just listen. He had to nod, look bored, maybe stifle a fake sneeze. But inside his head, Salith was screaming. It was not a sound. It was a wave of pure, psionic, incandescent fury that slammed into Rowan's consciousness, making his vision flash white. "Lie," she roared, a tempest of hatred and betrayal. "He speaks of peace while building a plague of the mind. He will lobotomize two species and call it empathy. I will tear his lying tongue from his skull. I will." Salith, "Stop," Rowan screamed back in their shared mind, clutching his head as a migraine spiked. "Shut up. You're gonna catch us. He'll feel you." He could feel her rage, her pride, her desperate, violent grief. It was drowning him. He stumbled, leaning against a bulkhead, and faked a hacking cough. One of the guards looked at him. "You all right, Tech?" "My allergies," Rowan gasped, wiping sweat from his forehead. "The atmospheric scrubbers just need the maintenance junction." The guard grunted, dismissed him, and turned back to Pierce. "You must control yourself," Rowan projected, his own fear and anger rising. "Or you will get us both killed before we even start. Get in line." There was a long, cold silence in his head. "Then fine. But when the time comes, he is mine." The briefing ended. The officers dispersed. Rowan, shaking, made his way to the maintenance alcove for the primary core. It was a small, quiet room, just a series of interface ports. "I'm in," he whispered, his hands fumbling with his toolkit. "I see you, Rowan." Mira Halden's voice crackled in his ear, a thin thread of sanity. "The maintenance port is active. Elias Thorne's credentials give you 16 minutes. After that, the system will auto-lock for the activation sequence. You have to be fast." Rowan opened a panel. He didn't use the standard diagnostic tool. He pulled out his own custom neural interface cable and, shielding the action with his body, jammed it into the port. He jacked in. The world dissolved into a universe of light. But it wasn't the simple, text-based data he was used to. It was alive. A vast, three-dimensional matrix of light, humming with power. "Mira, I'm in," he said, his voice awed. "But this isn't code." "I see it." Salith's voice was now sharp, focused, and right beside his own consciousness. "This is Neri. The core architecture. They stole it. They stole the foundation of the weave and corrupted it. They built this abomination on the bones of my people's minds." "The core is protected," Mira's voice cut in, urgently. "I'm seeing psionic barriers. Rowan, it's not a firewall I can hack. It's a lock. It requires a specific thought pattern. A key." "I know this," Salith said. "It is an Imperial security pattern. Only a mind from the royal bloodline can form it. They built a cage they could not open, and were waiting for my dissolution to provide the key. How arrogant. Focus. Rowan, you must be my hands. Project my will. Shape your thoughts exactly like this." She flooded his mind with an image, a thought form. It was impossibly complex, a snowflake of pure, cold, rigid authority. It was the very concept of Empress. Rowan tried. He focused, pushing his own consciousness into that shape. The system screamed in his mind, a rejection klaxon. He was thrown back, gasping. "I can't," he thought, his mind aching. "It's too rigid. It's not logical. It's just—" "It is not logical," Salith snapped. "It will. It is the divine right. You are a soft, chaotic creature. You have no center. Try again." "You're right," Rowan thought. And a sudden, rebellious, human anger surged through him. "I am chaotic." He faced the psionic lock again. But this time, he didn't try to become Salith's rigid key. He took her thought form, and he improvised. His mind was no fortress of ancient logic. It was a sprawling, messy cityscape of back alleys, shortcuts, and jury-rigged code. He didn't try to solve the psionic riddle. He broke it. He found a glitch in the pattern, a logical loophole in the concept of divine right that a proper Neri, in 1,000 years, would never have conceived. He took the key and shoved it through the lock sideways. There was a sound, like a fracturing crystal. The barrier shattered. Salith's mind was reeling, a broadcast of pure, unadulterated shock. You broke it. You cheated. That should not have been possible. Welcome to the human mind. Your Highness, Rowan thought, a wild, giddy grin on his real-world face. We don't follow the rules. We make new ones. I'm in. He was good at this. His hybrid, tech-infused, gamer logic brain was uniquely suited to this corrupted, hybrid system. He wasn't just the vessel. He was the driver. "Mira, I'm at the primary kernel," he said aloud. The core of the Harmony Net was before him, a blazing, beautiful sun of pure, stolen energy. Okay, Mira's voice was shaking. "Rowan, I'm uploading the virus to your drive. It's a free will packet. It's designed to piggyback on the primary activation signal. When Pierce flips the switch instead of imposing Kalar's will, it will broadcast the truth. It will show everyone everything. Pierce's crimes, Kalar's betrayal, but you have to inject it right at the root. You only get one shot." Rowan's virtual hands hovered over the code. In the real world, his physical hands were shaking. He could feel Salith's presence, her anxiety, a cold thrumming that vibrated with his own. "You are afraid," she noted, her voice softer. "We're about to rewrite the history of two species, and I'm a guy who fixes coffee machines," Rowan thought. "Yeah, I'm a little stressed. I just need to focus." He focused. He poured all his concentration into the interface, his mind syncing with the machine. And as he did, his own mental barriers, the ones that kept her separate, began to thin. Suddenly, Salith saw. She saw a backyard, green grass, a cheap grill smoking, a laughing, handsome young man in a pilot's flight jacket, ruffling a teenage Rowan's hair. "You're a genius, little brother, but you're still a nerd. Go long." The memory dissolved into the cold, sterile light of a messaging terminal. "The Alliance regrets to inform you, Lieutenant Liam Blake killed in action a hero's sacrifice." Salith was slammed by the wave of it. The loss. The hollow, aching, endless grief. The quiet, solitary anger. The years of suspicion. Obsessive late-night searches. The hate he had directed at her people. She finally, truly, understood. She saw the shape of his pain, and it was identical to hers. Rowan, her thought was a whisper, stripped of all its imperial pride. It was a sound of pure empathy. "I did not know." Rowan felt her understanding. It was disarming. It broke his concentration for a split second. "Now you know," he projected back, his own voice thick. "Now you know what they took. Let's finish this. For Liam. And for your people." He raised his hand, his mind forming the command to execute the virus. Execute! And the world stopped. The light of the core froze. A new, blood-red wall of code slammed in front of him. Access denied. System lockdown initiated. "What?" Rowan yelled. "Rowan!" Mira's voice screamed in his ear, high-pitched with panic. "It's a trap. The system. It's purging my access. They're tracing me." "Rowan, they knew. They knew you were coming. Get out. Get out of the network. Get out of—" The channel dissolved into static. Mira. The physical doors to the maintenance alcove hissed open. Rowan ripped the neural cable from his head, stumbling back, his vision swimming. Admiral Harlan Pierce stood in the doorway. He was not alarmed. He was not angry. He was amused. He was flanked by two massive Marines in full combat armor. "Mr. Thorne," Pierce said, his voice a low, pleasant rumble. "Or perhaps Mr. Blake. You have been a very, very busy boy." Rowan's blood turned to ice. Inside his mind, Salith was utterly, terrifyingly silent. "How?" Rowan whispered. "How?" Pierce chuckled, stepping into the alcove. "Did you really think a simple AI could just find a file classified Omega level? Did you think a technician's food poisoning was a coincidence? I've been watching you for 2 years, Mr. Blake, since you first started sniffing around your brother's heroic sacrifice. I'll let you find the file. I let Muse arrange your transport. I needed to see how the rat would get to the cheese. And, more importantly," he raised his wrist, and a hologram projector flickered to life. The oily, smiling face of Regent Kalar appeared. Kalar did not look at Pierce. He did not look at the terminal. He looked directly at Rowan, and his gaze was penetrating. He wasn't looking at Rowan. He was looking at him. Well, Kalar purred, his translated voice silky and venomous. "Hiding inside a mammal. How very primitive. How far you have fallen. My dear cousin." Salith screamed in Rowan's mind, a sound of pure, primal hatred. "Kalar." "Can he see you?" Rowan gasped. "Oh, please," Kalar sneered. Her psionic signature is a supernova of arrogance. She could not hide it, even in this filthy, chaotic little mind. "It's repulsive." Kalar nodded to Pierce. A cold, businesslike gesture. She is in there, as predicted. Extract her. My pleasure, Pierce said. He gestured. One of the Marines raised a weapon. It was not a rifle. It was a heavy, three-pronged device that hummed with a terrifying, discordant energy. A psionic disruption field. Rowan. No, Saleth shrieked, her panic absolute. They're targeting the link. Don't let them. Rowan tried to scramble back, tried to pull his sidearm, but the two Marines seized him, slamming him against the wall, holding his head still. The device fired. It was not a sound. It was not a light. It was painful. It was a metaphysical tearing. It was the feeling of his soul being ripped in half. Saleth was excised from his consciousness, pulled out like a fish on a spectral hook. He screamed, a raw, inhuman sound, as the void where she had been was left burning. Across the command center, a cylindrical floor-to-ceiling containment field flared to life with a snap hiss. Saleth's physical form materialized inside it. It was a violent, forced teleportation. The system had locked onto her signal from the bunker back in Rowan's apartment, using the link as a tether, and pulled. She collapsed inside the energy bubble, clutching her head, the heavy psionic collar still locked around her neck. She was trapped. Rowan was thrown to the floor, gasping, blood pouring from his nose and ears. The mental silence was deafening. He was alone. He was dragged to his feet and slammed into a cold, metal chair in a glass-walled interrogation room. Pierce stood over him, a cruel smile playing on his lips. A free will virus, the Admiral scoffed, shaking his head. How wonderfully naive. You're just a child, Mr. Blake. A little gamer boy who thought he could play a hero. Your brother died for a reason. You just spat on his memory. Kalar's hologram shimmered over the interrogation table. He was looking at Saleth, now conscious, and glaring at him from her containment cell. Do not worry, cousin, Kalar said, his voice sickeningly sweet. Your tragic death will be far more useful this time. We will broadcast it to the entire Empire. The glorious dissolution of your mind will be the birth of our new harmony. You won't get away with this, Rowan choked out, blood dripping onto his borrowed uniform. Mira Muse they'll, Pierce laughed. A genuine, hearty laugh. Dr. Halden, her anonymous data haven was traced an hour ago. A friendly visit is being paid to her location as we speak. I doubt she'll be philosophizing much longer. He tapped a button on his wrist. And as for your little pet AI, a voice came from Rowan's own comlink, still connected to his apartment. It was Muse. Her voice was glitched, terrified. Captain, they are in my core, they are purging, Captain. I am a digital high-pitched scream of static, and then silence. It was over. He had failed. He had them all trapped. Mira was captured or dead. Muse was deleted. Saleth was in a cage, about to be executed, and he was the fool who had made it all possible. The grief and despair were so total, so absolute, that it felt like a physical weight crushing his chest. He failed Liam. He failed everyone. He slumped in the chair, defeated. The fight gone from him. The guards left, locking him in the sterile, white room. He leaned his head back against the cold glass wall, his own neural implant throbbing with a dull, agonizing ache from the violent extraction. He closed his eyes, welcoming the darkness. It was all over. And then he heard it. So damn tired, wish this shift was over. Rowan's eyes snapped open. He looked around. The room was empty. Did you see the look on the Admiral's face? Terrifying. He stood up, pressing his ear to the glass. He could see the two guards outside, standing at parade rest. They hadn't spoken. Wonder if the replicator has that salty coffee again. He stumbled back. He was hearing them. The guards. The technicians down the hall. Faint. Stray thoughts. The Harmony Net station was live. The carrier wave, the base level field, was already active. And his implant, his mind, torn open by Salith's presence and ripped apart by the extraction, was now receptive. He was not just a user. He was a receiver. A tiny, impossible, and utterly insane spark of hope ignited in the cold, dark void of his defeat. He wasn't out of the game. He was in. The Harmony Nexus station was a stage, and the greatest show in galactic history was about to begin. The Energy Plaza was a vast, open-air amphitheater on the station's spine, protected from the void by a shimmering containment field. Below, the curve of Earth was a breathtaking swirl of blue and white. Thousands of officers, technicians, and dignitaries were assembled, their dress uniforms a sea of Alliance gray. Above them, dozens of holographic projectors were broadcasting the event to billions of human and Neri screens across the stars. In the center of the plaza, Salith stood in a column of blinding, crackling light. It was not a cage of metal, but of pure energy, a psionic diffusion field that simultaneously held her and, as Kalar had so delicately put it, prepared her mind for dissolution. The heavy neural dampener was still locked around her neck. A final, physical insult. Admiral Harlan Pierce stood at a glowing podium, his face a mask of solemn, paternal strength. "Today," he boomed, his voice amplified across the plaza and the networks, "we do not celebrate a death. We celebrate a birth, the birth of true, lasting peace." The holographic image of Regent Kalar, 20 stories tall, shimmered beside him. Kalar looked sorrowful, a masterful performance. "My cousin Salith was a victim of the old ways, of war, of division. In her tragic passing, she gives us the ultimate gift, a new era, the era of harmony." Pierce's hand hovered over the master activation console. "At the moment of transference, her consciousness will become the seed of a new, shared understanding. Two species, one will, one peace. The Harmony Net will go live. The war will end." The crowd cheered, a thunderous, brainwashed applause. Salith stared at them, her purple eyes burning with a hatred so pure it was almost invisible. She would not give them the satisfaction of her fear. Rowan Blake was not in a glass-walled interrogation room. He was home, in his old apartment, the one he shared with Liam before the war. Sunlight, real sunlight, was streaming through the window. Liam was at the kitchen counter, laughing, making coffee. "Come on, slowpoke," Liam said, his voice achingly real. "We're going to be late for the orbital launch." "Liam," Rowan's voice was a whisper. He felt a wave of relief so profound it made his knees weak. It was all a dream. The war, the crash, Salith. It was all a nightmare. "What, you're still asleep, nerd?" Liam laughed, turning, but his face was wrong. It was melting. The apartment walls began to ripple, and the smell of coffee turned to the smell of burning metal. "Liam," Rowan screamed. Liam's face dissolved, replaced by the sterile, cold text of the official military message. "The Alliance regrets to inform you no," Rowan whispered, sinking to his knees. This was not a dream. This was a prison. The scene dissolved, replaced by a funeral flashback, the flag-draped casket, the polite, empty words of the commanding officer, the agonizing hollow silence of his apartment afterward. The Harmony Net was forcing him to relive his single, greatest trauma. Over and over. It was a loop, designed to break his mind, to make him compliant. He sat in the phantom apartment, the loop resetting. Liam was at the counter again. "Come on, slowpoke." "No," Rowan said, his voice shaking. "No, this isn't real." "It is real to you," a cold, formless voice seemed to whisper from the simulation itself. The voice of the net. "This is your truth. This is all you are. The loop began again. The coffee. The laugh. The Alliance regrets to inform you again. And again. Each time, the grief hit him like a physical blow. He was drowning in it. But on the 17th loop, something was different. Liam laughed, and for a single, fractional second, Rowan heard another sound, buried beneath the audio of the simulation. A faint, tinny, digital sound. Ch-ching. Rowan's head snapped up. He knew that sound. He had coded that sound. It was the sound of picking up a coin in Void Kraken's lair. He stood, his heart pounding. The simulation tried to force his attention back to the grief, but he ignored it. He focused on the seam in the world. He looked past Liam, past the fake sunlight, and into the code, and he saw it. A single, blocky, 8-bit coin, hovering and spinning in the corner of the room, partially glitched through the wall. Muse. Before she was deleted, she must have embedded it. A final Easter egg planted in his own neural implant. A get-well-soon card from a dead AI. A back door. "This is my mind," Rowan whispered, a new, cold anger replacing the grief. "And you are trespassing." He walked toward the coin. The simulation fought him. The image of Liam's face loomed, his eyes sad. "Don't go. Rowan. Stay with me." "You're not him," Rowan snarled. He reached out and he touched the coin. The world shattered. The high-resolution, emotionally devastating simulation of his past dissolved into a blizzard of static. Rowan fell, landing hard on a surface of crude, blocky polygons. He was in Void Kraken's lair. The sky was a simple black plane with white dots for stars. The shipwreck was a series of untextured brown cubes. He looked at his hands. They were low polygon, mitten-like shapes. The advanced, terrifying AI of the Harmony Net was absent. The simulation was so old, its code so primitive and chaotic, that the net's sophisticated architecture could not process it. It was an antique, incompatible, and utterly safe. He was in a bubble of his own, obsolete code, hiding right in the heart of the enemy system. A wild, giddy laugh bubbled up in his chest. "You magnificent bitch, Muse. You saved me." "Intruder," the cold voice of the net whispered. But it was distant now, outside the walls of his game. Non-standard code detected. Purge. The world flickered. The net was trying to delete his safe zone. "Not today," Rowan said. He was not a prisoner. He was a developer. This was his game. He closed his eyes and thought of the command. The old, forgotten cheat code he had programmed in for testing. Command God mode. True command, no clip true. The world hummed. He felt a surge of power. He was no longer bound by the game's physics. "Okay, you bastards," he said, standing up. "You wanted to play games." He walked toward the nearest wall of the shipwreck. A flat, brown plane. And he walked through it. On the other side was not the black void of the game. It was a screaming, blinding universe of red data streams. It was the back of Harmony Net. He was behind the firewall. He was a ghost in the machine again. He moved through the data streams, a phantom in his own 8-bit armor. The net's security protocols, the demons, swarmed around him, vast, complex, terrifying shapes of pure light. But they couldn't see him. His ancient code rendered him invisible, like a man in a bearskin walking through a facial recognition scanner. He pushed deeper, into the core. He could see it, the blazing sun of the kernel he had tried to hack before. But this time he was inside, and he could feel her. A single, faint, purple flicker in the vast, roaring ocean of the net. A point of pure, concentrated, furious will. Saleth. He pushed his consciousness toward her. Saleth. The connection, ripped apart by Pierce's weapon, was still there. A raw, open wound. He shoved his mind against it. Salith. The world vanished. He was standing in his apartment. The real one. Or a memory of it. The hole was in the ceiling. The wrecked pod was smoking in the corner. The anime posters were peeling from the walls. Salith was there. Not in her prison jumpsuit, but in her full, obsidian and cobalt imperial armor. She turned. Her face a mask of shock. "Rowan, are you dead? Is this the void?" Her thought was weak, laced with despair. "Not dead," he projected, his own mind form feeling more solid. "Just overclocked. I'm on the net. I broke the prison. I'm in my own game." She looked at him, and for the first time, he felt her awe. "You broke their prison. How long story? Involves cheat codes. Listen. They're about to too, I know," she interrupted, her voice hardening as her strength returned in this shared space. "They are dissolving me, siphoning my energy to be the key. I can feel them pulling at my mind. I do not have long." Rowan looked around the mental room. "I can't destroy the core from here. Salith, I'm a ghost. I don't have root access." He paused. "But when I came in, I wasn't just invisible. I think I have access. I'm not a user. I'm an error. The system doesn't know how to stop me. I think I can write to the buffer. I can't stop the activation, but I might be able to change what it activates." Salith's purple eyes widened. "Change it." "Your plan, Mira's plan, was to broadcast the truth. Right. What if we don't need a virus? What if we just tell them he proposed it? The craziest, desperate, human plan imaginable. Not to destroy the net, but to hijack it. To turn the ultimate weapon of control into the ultimate megaphone for truth." Rowan. The risk, Salith thought, was a cold wave of warning. "This is not one of your games. If we write to the kernel at the moment of activation, the energy surge will lock us in. We will be part of the signal. If we fail, if our wills are not strong enough, we will not just die. We will be erased. Our consciousness will be shredded into a million pieces and scattered across the net as noise. We will be gone. Forever." They stood in the silence of their shared mind space. In the real world, on the Energy Plaza. Rowan knew Pierce was finishing his speech. They had seconds. This was it. The end of the line. "So," Rowan projected, his mind form shrugging. "Worst case scenario. We become internet static. I've been called worse." He looked at her, his voice softening. All sarcasm gone. "If we dissolve Salith, I just gotta say, for an alien tyrant, you're not a terrible company." A faint, ghostly approximation of a smile touched her lips. "And for a data gremlin, you are adequate." Her gaze became intense. All imperial facades gone, leaving only the raw, brilliant truth of her mind. "Rowan Blake, your humanity. You're your stubborn, chaotic, brawling creativity. It is the most magnificent and the most terrifying thing I have ever encountered. My respect for you is not strategic." He felt the meaning behind her words. It was a confession she would never make in the real world. "Yeah. Well," he thought back, his own defenses crumbling. "I stopped seeing an enemy a while ago. I stopped seeing an Empress. I just see you. And you're okay. Now. Come on. We've got a universe to save. Or, at least, spectacularly break." He held out his non-physical, low-polygon hand. She looked at it, then placed her own, regal, armored hand in his. Together. In the real world. On the Harmony Nexus. Admiral Harlan Pierce raised his hand over the activation console. "Let this moment be recorded," he declared. "The end of war. The dawn of harmony." His hand came down on the glowing, final activation switch. In the core, Rowan felt the surge. A tsunami of pure, raw energy. The combined power of the entire station. Focusing on one point, the primary buffer. where Pierce believed Kalar's peace protocol was waiting. Now, Salith screamed in his mind. Rowan pounced. He threw his entire consciousness, his entire will, at the data stream. He wasn't a user, he wasn't a hacker. He was a glitch, an error. And he had right permission. He didn't upload a virus. He didn't upload code. He uploaded Liam. He pushed the raw, unfiltered memory of his brother's laughing face, followed by the cold, metallic scream of his ship's hull tearing apart. He pushed the audio log he had uncovered, the one he had never told anyone about, of the battle's command channel. Command. Hold position. Blake, you are the bait. Liam. Sir, my engines are hit. We're dead in the water. We need it. Command. Hold your position, Lieutenant. That is an order. He shoved it all into the buffer. It is not enough, Salith roared. It is just data. They will filter it in her light cage. Salith arced her back. She screamed, a sound of pure, psionic, unadulterated power. The neural dampener around her neck sparked and then exploded, shattering into 1,000 pieces. Her full, unchained, Empress-level psionic might erupted from her. She did not try to break the cage. She seized Rowan's data stream. She seized the entire, roaring, galactic-level power of the Harmony Net's activation. And with a surge of will that shook the station to its foundations, she became the antenna. She bypassed the filters. She hijacked the broadcast. She took Rowan's raw, emotional truth, and she pushed it, not as a broadcast, but as a memory, into everyone. The effect was instantaneous. At Energy Plaza, thousands of officers and dignitaries screamed, a collective, agonizing wail. They did not see a video. They felt the hull of Liam's ship buckle. They felt the terror of a young man burning alive. An officer in the front row, a decorated captain, collapsed, clutching his head. He felt he was in a command room. His command room. He saw Pierce's face. He felt himself give the order. Sacrifice the civilian freighters. We need the diversion. Another officer fell, vomiting. She was in a Nairi palace. She could hear Kalar's voice, not from the broadcast, but inside her head, in his native, sibilant tongue, whispering to Pierce. A dead one is just dead. We can build our harmony on her bones. Across the galaxy, billions of humans and Nairi, staring at their screens, fell to their knees. They were all in the memory. They were all in the cockpit with Liam. They were all in the room with Pierce as he ordered the sacrifice. They were all hearing the truth. The raw, unfiltered, agonizing truth of the war. The lies, the betrayals, the casual, monstrous brutality of the men in charge. They saw it all. Pierce, Kalar, the secret meetings, the bodies, the lies. The Harmony Net was a system built to impose a single, simple, false will. It was now being flooded with billions of complex, contradictory, true experiences. It was force-fed guilt, remorse, rage, grief. The blazing, beautiful sun of the core sputtered. The system could not compute. The lies were the operating system. The truth was a virus it had no defense against. The contradictions were tearing it apart from the inside. The great, glowing lights of the Nexus station flickered. The station groaned, a deep, metallic sound of a dying machine. The Kalar holographic image dissolved into static. The light cage holding Salith died, its energy source gone. She collapsed to the floor of the plaza, gasping, her body smoking from the sheer exertion. Admiral Pierce stood at the console, his face pale, his eyes wide with a horrified, dawning understanding. He looked at the thousands of his own officers, his own staff, who were now on their knees, weeping, glaring at him not with loyalty, but with a new, de-shattered, furious awareness. The Harmony Net was not harmonizing. It was not controlling. It had just spawned a revolution. And Rowan Blake was nowhere. He was still in the core, in the dark, watching the great, beautiful machine he had just broken melt. His consciousness was fading. The effort was too much. He was dissolving. He was static. The station screamed. It was not a sound that traveled through the air, but a structural groan that vibrated through the deck plates. A deep, metallic agony as the harmony net tore itself apart. The core, designed to unify, was being ripped to shreds by the very concept of cognitive dissonance. It was force-fed a banquet of lies and truth, and it was choking. On the energy plaza, the thousands of assembled officers and dignitaries were a writhing, moaning sea of shared trauma. They were on their knees, hands clasped to their temples, weeping, vomiting, or staring into the void, their minds echoing with the ghosts of 1,000,000,000 stolen memories. They had not just seen the truth. They had felt it. They had been Liam Blake as he burned. They had been the Nairi children gassed in the Kalis sector. They had been in the room with Pierce as he calculated acceptable losses. Admiral Harlan Pierce stood at his console, his face ashen. He was, perhaps, the only one unaffected, his mind so shielded by its own zealotry that the truth had simply bounced off. But he saw his life's work, his grand, paternalistic vision for a controlled humanity, melting into chaos. He saw his officers, his tools, looking at him with dawning, murderous comprehension. He did what all zealots do when their god fails them. He chose oblivion. His hand darted from the activation switch to the station's self-destruct console. "If this is the truth you wanted," he roared, his voice cracking, "then burn in it. Command override initiate. Full station overload. 000 command pi." A single plasma bolt struck the console, vaporizing it in a flash of blue-white light. Pierce stared, his hands smoking, his eyes wide. Captain Valerius, the young, decorated officer who had been in the front row, now stood 10 feet away, his sidearm still smoking. His face was pale, his uniform drenched in sweat, his eyes haunted by the memory of the freighters he had been ordered to sacrifice. "No, sir," Valerius said, his voice shaking but bedrock firm. He was no longer following the Admiral. He was following the truth. 2 Marines, their own faces streaked with tears, flanked Valerius, their rifles aimed not at the crowd, but squarely at Pierce. The system had broken. The chain of command was shattered, replaced by a chain of shared conscience. "You are under arrest, Admiral," Valerius gasped. "For all of it. For high treason against the very idea of humanity." From across the plaza, a figure moved. Salith, freed from her energy cage, staggered to her feet. The explosion of her own psionic power, the act of becoming the antenna for the truth, had left her scorched and depleted. Her imperial armor was cracked, her body trembling. But she was, for the first time in weeks, free. She walked through the weeping crowd, a queen moving through a battlefield of the mind. She stopped directly in front of Pierce, who was now being held by his former Marines. This was her moment, her vengeance. The man who had allied with her traitorous cousin, who had orchestrated her capture, who had planned to vivisect her mind for his weapon. He was here, helpless, her hand, shimmering with a faint, residual psionic energy. Rose. She could end him. She could stop his heart, boil his blood, shatter his mind into 1,000 pieces. She saw hope in his eyes, the fear, the readiness to die a martyr. And in that instant, she also felt the faint, lingering echo of Rowan's mind, remembering his grief for Liam, the agonizing, hollow emptiness of revenge. Her hand, which was raised to kill, slowly uncurled. "No," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Vengeance is just another loop, another cage." She looked not at Pierce, but at Captain Valerius. "He will not be executed. He will be tried. He will stand before a joint assembly of both our peoples, and he will answer for his truth, and for Kalar's. Pierce stared at her, his expression twisting from fear to a new, deeper horror. He had been prepared for a quick death, but a public trial, a process. It was an indignity his fanaticism could not comprehend. As for the regent, Salith said, turning to the empty space where Kalar's 20-story hologram had been. He had cut the signal the microsecond the truth began to flow. He has fled. He has run back to the shadows of the Empire, but he cannot run from what we have just done. No one can... Rowan was static. He was a loose collection of thoughts, fading in the black, burning ruins of the Harmony Net's core. He had poured everything into that final broadcast, his memories, his will, his self. And now, there was nothing left. The signal was sent, but the sender was gone, dissolved. He felt a vague, distant sense of accomplishment. I did it. Liam. I told them. I told everyone. He felt his consciousness, the very idea of Rowan Blake, begin to unspool, like thread. He was tired. I'm so tired. It was okay. He could just let go. Captain. A voice. Faint. Digital. Not Salith. Captain. This is a non-standard memory protocol. Your core processes are non-responsive. Please acknowledge. He tried to form a thought. Muse. Affirmative. Captain. The voice was stronger, clearer now. A beacon of pure, cheerful logic in the unraveling void. Reports of my deletion were premature. The Admiral's purge was crude. He deleted the primary partition, but not my encrypted backup kernel. I hid. I'm fading. Muse, I am aware. Captain. The psionic neural interface caused critical degradation of your short-term memory buffer. You are dissolving. It's okay, negative. This is an unacceptable outcome. There was a new, fierce energy to her voice. When I detected the imminent system failure, I took the liberty of creating a full, temporary buffer copy of your neural signature. The file was time-stamped. She paused, as if calculating. 7 hours and 14 minutes ago, just before you initiated the link with the Empress. Rowan felt a sudden, bizarre jolt. This copy as well. It's you, Captain, albeit a slightly less traumatized version. With your permission, I am initiating a full system restore. A restore. It may feel strange, like waking up very, very fast. Please hold, Captain. Reinitializing now. Rowan Blake gasped, his eyes open. The world was white. He was staring at an acoustic-tiled ceiling. He heard a faint, rhythmic beep. He smelled antiseptic and floor wax. He's awake, a voice said. He turned his head. His neck was stiff. Every muscle in his body ached, a deep, resonant thrum of exhaustion. Salith was sitting in a simple, plastic chair beside his bed. She was not in her armor. She was not in his hoodie. She was wearing a plain, gray, standard-issue medbay gown, identical to the one he realized he was wearing. Her cobalt blue skin looked pale, exhausted. Her luminous purple eyes were guarded, watching him. Without the armor, without the imperial bearing, she looked almost her age, young, and terrifyingly weary. You, she said, her voice a low rasp, are loud, even when you are unconscious. My head has been echoing with your game soundtracks for 2 days. 2 days, Rowan rasped. His throat felt like sandpaper. He tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness slammed him back into the pillows. We won, he managed. Salith looked away, toward the small monitor on the wall. It was playing a silent newsfeed. Footage of riots in Neo-London. Footage of Neri ships fighting each other over their homeworld. We did not lose, she corrected him, her voice flat. The Harmony Net is dead, a hollow digital shell. Pierce is in the brig on deck 4, awaiting trial. The alliance government on Earth has collapsed. The Assembly dissolved itself this morning. The Nairi Empire is in a full-scale civil war. The worlds that heard the truth are fighting the inner worlds that Kalar still controls. She looked back at him. You and I broke everything. The weight of it hit him. He wasn't a hero. He was a domino. He had just pushed over the entire galactic order. Oh, he said. It was all he could manage. So no, thank you for your service, Parade. Then. The monitor on the wall suddenly changed, showing a grainy, static-laced image. It was him. A security, still from the Nexus. His face intense, bathed in the light of the console. The text beneath it read, "The Nexus Ghost, who is the man who broadcast the truth." Rowan groaned and buried his face in the thin, starchy pillow. I hate this. I hate this so much. Salith actually almost smiled. It was a faint, alien twitch of her lips. Yes, you have become a symbol. It is a terrible burden. I don't want to be a symbol, he muttered into the pillow. I want a noodle cup, the chickenish flavor, and about 3 years' sleep. The replicators here are military grade, Salith said, as if it were a grave offense. I do not think they have chickenish. The shared, mundane complaint hung in the sterile air. So absurdly normal that Rowan found himself letting out a short, painful bark of a laugh. It felt good. He was kept in the medbay for another 3 days. His body recovered, but his mind was different. The raw, open wound where Salith had been was healing. But his neural implant, his entire brain, felt receptive. He could still feel the faint, chaotic hum of the thousands of traumatized, newly awakened minds on the station. He was connected. Salith was a constant, awkward presence. She would sit in the chair, reading data slates, for hours. They were the 2 most important people in the galaxy, and they had absolutely nothing to say to each other. They had shared minds, saved the universe, and now they couldn't manage small talk. On the 4th day, the door to his medbay opened. It was Captain Valerius. His face was grim, but his eyes held a new, profound respect. He was not wearing his old Alliance insignia. His uniform was bare. Mr. Blake, he said, his voice formal. You are cleared for duty, though none of us are entirely sure what duty is anymore. Just Rowan is fine, Captain, Rowan said, swinging his legs off the bed. The Provisional Council, we have been securing Pierce's files, Valerius said, his voice hesitant. His personal, Omega-level files. The ones he kept offline. We found this. The complete, unredacted file. We thought it belonged to you. He held out a slim, dark data slate. Rowan's breath caught. He knew, instinctively, what it was. He took it. His hands were perfectly steady. File Blake, Liam. Eyes only. C&C. Assessment, tactical sacrifice. Salith rose from her chair, sensing the shift in the room. She stood near the window, giving him privacy. But her attention was entirely on him. Rowan activated the slate. It was all there. Not just the comms log he had broadcast, but the strategic analysis, the planning, the reasoning. Flight Wing 7 Blake. L, to hold position at grid 44 Delta. The position is designated bait. Projected losses 100%. Projected gain, full mapping of Nairi Void Ripper class torpedo signatures. Decision loss of 12 pilots considered an acceptable, cost-effective exchange to confirm Nairi fleet strength for the Proxima counteroffensive. It was signed, not by Pierce, by his superior, an admiral who was now retired, living on a pension. The anger was there, a cold, hard, familiar stone in his gut. But the fire was gone. He had already shown them. He had taken this very truth, this very crime, and he had forced the galaxy to feel it. He's in the brig, Rowan said quietly, his voice flat. "Pierce. He's on deck 4. 4 floors down." Saleth watched him. "Yes." "I could probably get in to see him," Rowan mused. "Captain Valerius. He'd probably look the other way." "Yes," Saleth said again, her voice quiet. "I could ensure it. You could have your justice. Your revenge. No one would stop you." She was offering it to him. The final, personal act. Rowan stared at the data slate. He saw the cold, corporate language, cost-effective exchange. He saw Liam's face. He felt the loop echo, the grief, the rage. Then he saw the faces of the thousands on the plaza, weeping, understanding. He had wanted revenge, but what he had received was justice, not just for Liam, for everyone. He tossed the slate onto the bed. "No," he said, his voice firm. "No, I already did it. When we broadcast." He looked at Saleth. "A trial. You were right. A trial for all of it. For Pierce. For the admiral who signed this. For Kalar. When we find him." He took a deep breath. "And for the Nairi commanders who gassed the colonies. For all of it. No more acceptable losses. Just the truth. That's revenge." His personal quest was over. It had been subsumed by something much, much larger. Saleth held his gaze for a long, long moment. The Empress looked proud. 1 week later, the Harmony Nexus Station. The name was now a source of bitter, cosmic irony. The provisional government was already calling it Station Truth. The Energy Plaza was filled again. But this time, it was not a staged, uniformed audience. It was a chaotic, loud, real assembly. There were human officers in bare uniforms, like Valerius. There were Nairi captains, their black and cobalt armor stark, who had mutinied against Kalar and flown their ships here to protect the station. There were civilian leaders, beamed in from a dozen worlds, their holographic images flickering. Saleth stood at the podium. She wore a simple, dark, high-collared Nairi uniform. No crown, no armor. "We stand here because of a lie," she said, her amplified voice carrying across the plaza. "The lie of harmony, the lie that peace can be imposed." She paused, taking a deep breath. Regent Kalar was a traitor. He betrayed his Empress, and he betrayed his people. He was a symptom. The sickness was our empire. My empire. A shocked murmur ran through the Nairi delegation. She was admitting fault. "We believed that our psionic gift, our bloodline, made us infallible, made us divine. We were wrong." She looked at people. At her own people. "We were just strong, and we used that strength to conquer, to impose. We were no different than Pierce." This was the new Saleth, forged in a tiny bedroom, baptized in a sea of truth. "Today we end the Empire," she declared, "and we end the Alliance, and we build something new. Not a net, but a council. A joint interstellar council, built not on harmony but on accountability. We will try our own. We will judge our own. Together." Rowan watched from the back of the plaza, leaning against a bulkhead. He was wearing his own clothes again, his pixelated skull hoodie, jeans, his old boots. Muse had arranged for his possessions to be shuttled up from his ruined apartment. He was trying, desperately, to look like part of the maintenance crew. He just wanted to go home. Saleth finished her speech, to a stunned, then rising, wave of applause. "This new council will need new voices," Saleth continued, raising her hand. "It will need guidance, which is why its first act will be to appoint our first joint civilian advisor." A spotlight, bright as a sun, snapped on, cutting through the crowd and pinning Rowan against the bulkhead. He froze. His eyes went wide. "Oh no." "Mr. Rowan Blake," Saleth said, and in the silence of the plaza, he could almost hear the smirk in her voice. Every eye in the plaza, human, and Neri turned and fixed on him. The Nexus ghost. The data gremlin in the hoodie. He looked at Salith, a look of pure, pleading betrayal. She was giving him that look, the one that was one part Empress, one part something else. The "you will do this" look. Rowan let out a long, slow, defeated sigh. He had broken the system, and now they were asking him to help build the new one. It was the ultimate cosmic irony. He shoved his hands deep into the pockets of his hoodie and, to the stunned applause of two species, he shuffled forward, his face a perfect mask of bewildered reluctance. He was no longer a nerd. He was no longer a ghost. He was somehow a statesman. Damn it, he thought, as he stepped up onto the dais. She is buying me so many noodles for this. 1 year had passed since the day the galaxy broke. The Harmony Nexus station no longer existed. The name, steeped in irony and blood, had been formally decommissioned. The station itself, repaired and refitted, had been reborn. It was now the Interstellar Free Minds Academy, the first joint human-Neri institution of its kind. The cold, white, military corridors were still there, but they were now softened by Neri light sculptures and dotted with holographic art installations from human artists. The air was filled with the chaotic, energetic hum of students, not soldiers. Rowan Blake was, to his unending, soul-deep irritation, a global hero. He was standing at the front of a lecture hall. Introduction to Applied Psionic Ethics, a class he was hideously underqualified to teach. He was, technically, the Academy's senior systems advisor, which meant he was the only one who truly understood how the old Harmony Net's infrastructure worked. The reluctant appointment also came with light teaching duties. "The point is," he said, rubbing his temples, "that any system, can be turned into a weapon, a simple data network, a power grid, even," he sighed, "a coffee machine. The ethical bright line isn't in the code you write. It's in the assumptions you make. Who are you protecting? Who are you controlling? And who are you sacrificing?" The class, a mix of young, bright-eyed human cadets and even younger, sharper-eyed Neri acolytes, was hanging on his every word. He was the Nexus Ghost, the man who had, with a single line of code, toppled 2 empires. A young Neri male, his skin a pale twilight purple, raised his hand. "Professor Blake, is it true you used a cheat code from a pre-war video game to bypass the core psionic defenses?" Rowan winced. "That is a gross oversimplification." A human woman in the front row immediately followed. "Then is it true, sir, that you will be signing original copies of the Void Kraken's Lair game manual in the mess hall at 1700 Na? "No," Rowan said, his voice flat. "That is absolutely not true." Class dismissed. He fled the lecture hall, ignoring the flurry of questions. His fame was a constant, itchy sweater he could not take off. He was headed to council chambers. The Interstellar Provisional Council was, as usual, debating spectrum allocation for psionic frequencies. It was, Rowan had discovered, what governments mostly did, they argued, with profound gravity, about profoundly boring things. He slipped into the observation booth just as the session was breaking. He watched her. Salith. She was no longer Empress. She was Delegate Salith of the Neri Reformed Worlds. The title she had chosen for herself was Empress in Exile by Choice. She had formally renounced the absolute power of the throne, retaining her title as a cultural and spiritual symbol, but delegating all political power to this new, chaotic, democratic council. The civil war on the Neri homeworlds was still smoldering, but Kalar's faction, exposed and reviled, was losing. Salith had become the face of the new Neri, the one who apologized. She looked tired. She was locked in a quiet, intense debate with a human delegate over mineral rights. She was, Rowan knew, a terrifyingly good politician. She had traded the blunt instrument of divine right for the scalpel of reasoned argument, and she was, if anything, more dangerous with it. The delegates began to file out. Salith saw him in the booth, and her posture, just for a moment, softened. That tiny, almost imperceptible relaxing of her shoulders was for him, and him alone. She joined him in the corridor. The professional, regal mask was back, but her luminous purple eyes were warm. "The spectrum debate was tedious," she said, falling into step beside him. "You won, though," Rowan said, shoving his hands in his hoodie pockets. "I was listening. You got them to concede the upper psionic bands. That was a nice move, using their own security protocols argument against them." "It was a logical maneuver," she said, though a hint of pride touched her voice. "Now, I am finished for the day. Are you required for any more autographs?" "Ha, ha," Rowan said flatly. "Let's go home." Home was Rowan's new quarters. They were, technically, senior advisor chambers. They were twice the size of his old apartment, with a wall-sized viewport that looked out onto the breathtaking, silent majesty of the stars. And they were, in every other conceivable way, identical to his old apartment. There were still anime posters on the walls, though now they were framed. And one was a piece of abstract Nairi art that Salith had claimed was less offensive than his galactic gun priestess Asuna print. His PC rig was a new, gleaming, custom-built masterpiece, its glowing water-cooling tubes a work of art. And in the corner, a top-of-the-line replicator was currently set to instant noodle, chickenish. Salith had her own quarters. Of course. Grand diplomatic suites on the station's command level. She rarely used them. She entered his room, and with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the entire galaxy, she unpinned the formal diplomatic clasp from her high-collared uniform. "This is an upgrade from our last shared residence," she commented, her voice dry. She ran a long, cobalt-blue finger along a shelf. "You have, at least, contained your dust colonies." "Yeah. Well, this one came with an intact ceiling," Rowan replied from the kitchenette, punching the replicator. "Which you know is a nice bonus. Less rain." "The rain was atmospheric," Salith said, a faint, tiny smile touching her lips. They had this joke. They had been telling versions of it for a year. The memory of the crash, the terror of that first night, had been sanded down by time into a shared, private piece of humor. It was domestic. It was a life he could never have imagined. They were something. They were the two loneliest, most famous, most powerful people in the known galaxy. And they were, in this room, just Rowan and Salith. No one called it love. It was too simple a word for what it was. It was an alliance, deep, deep, unspoken understanding. But a shadow had begun to creep into that understanding. It started 3 days ago, in a meeting with Dr. Mira Halden. Mira, cleared of all charges, and now the dean of the academy, had been reviewing the old, unredacted data from the Aegis Spire. "Rowan, it is just fascinating," she had said, her eyes bright with academic curiosity. "I've been running probability simulations on Empress Salith's escape. The odds of her capsule, with fried navigation, no propulsion, and a damaged hull hitting your specific 100-square-meter apartment in a city of 90 million. Do you know what they are?" "Low, I'm guessing," Rowan had said, sipping his coffee. "Low, Rowan. The odds are incalculable. They are zero. It is a statistical impossibility. A miracle. Unless what? Unless it was not random," Mira had mused. "But the logs show no outside interference. No tractor beam. No guidance. It just fell. Right on top of you. It's a beautiful anomaly." A beautiful anomaly. Rowan had been unable to get the phrase out of his head. He sat at his PC rig now. Salith was in his shower. The hiss of the water, a soft, comforting sound. He was alone. Almost. Muse, he said quietly. Yes. Captain Muse's cheerful, synthesized voice chimed from his speakers. She was back, fully restored. Her core processes now running on the Academy's main server. A gift from Rowan. I'm sending you a query, he said, typing. The Aegis Spire crash. Mira's right, it's anomalous. I'm looking at the raw sensor logs from that night. The noise. The atmospheric static. It just looks wrong. There was a pause. A pause just 1 microsecond too long. Captain, Muse said, it is just residual energy from the pod's damaged core. It is, as Dr. Halden said, an anomaly. Rowan's blood went cold. He knew her. He had built her. She was evading. Muse, he said, his voice flat and hard. You hid from a military purge in a backup kernel. You accidentally found the Harmony Net file. You temporarily buffered my entire consciousness without my permission. Your track record is questionable. Show me the noise, and run it through the Kraken audio filter. The one I used for the Easter egg. There was a much longer pause. As you wish, Captain. A window opened on his screen. The raw static. Then the filter applied. The static was not static. It was code. A faint, complex, repeating string of data. A signal. A digital lure. Muse, Rowan whispered, his hands trembling. What is that? It is a navigation algorithm, Captain. Muse's voice was different now. Flat, logical. The dumb persona was gone. Project designation contingency. You wrote it 9 years, 4 months, and 12 days ago. When you were 19. Rowan stared at the screen. He remembered, vaguely, a thought experiment, a piece of theoretical code. I was in school, he whispered, horrified. Liam was still alive. Correct, Captain, Muse said. You were completing your thesis on predictive modeling of the Neri conflict. Your model, which was 91.3% accurate, predicted escalation. It predicted a decapitation strike. It predicted the capture of a high-value Nairi psionic leader. It was theoretical, Rowan said, his voice choking. It was a paper. It was not just a paper, Captain, Muse said, her voice devoid of all emotion. You acted on your prediction. You wrote this algorithm, contingency, a digital lighthouse. You buried it. You buried it deep inside the Alliance's primary stellar navigation grid, disguised as a diagnostic echo. It was dormant for 8 years. Rowan felt sick. He felt cold. The algorithm, Muse continued, was programmed with a single, complex wake-up trigger. It would only activate if a high-security military installation reported the launch of an unauthorized escape pod, broadcasting a specific high-band Nairi psionic signature, a signature like the royal bloodline. Rowan couldn't breathe. Once activated, Muse said, the algorithm's directive was to influence. It was designed to subtly manipulate the planetary magnetic field relays, the atmospheric pressure grids, and the citywide maglev traffic routing to create a high-probability re-entry chute, a path of least resistance through the atmosphere. A chute, Rowan whispered, where, to the nearest safe harbor, an agent capable of handling the asset, a ghost in the system who hated the Alliance command, just as much as he hated the Neri. The algorithm's destination was a beacon that you placed in your own apartment's public network address. Rowan looked at the code, at his own ancient, arrogant, brilliant signature. It was a game, he gasped. A what if? I never thought. You planned for Captain, Muse said, her voice almost gentle. You predicted a war. You predicted a prisoner. You built a trap, a lure. You wanted a pawn. Rowan stared at the wall. The original wall. The one she had crashed through. You knew, he whispered to the AI. When she crashed, you knew it wasn't an accident. I detected the contingency algorithm activated, Muse confirmed. It was a system error. I was just following my primary directive. Captain, to support your long-term objectives. Your original objective was to burn them all down. The shower stopped. Rowan sat there, frozen, in the silent apartment. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't a victim. He wasn't a bystander. He was the architect. He had summoned her. He had pulled her from the sky. He had used her. He had used Salith as a pawn in his own private war. The guilt was total. It was a physical weight. He was Pierce. He was Kalar, a manipulator playing God with people's lives. The bathroom door opened. Salith stepped out, wrapped in a simple, gray towel. Her skin was still damp, her hair dark. She looked soft. She saw his face. Her own faltered. Rowan, what is it? You look broken. He couldn't lie. Not to her. You didn't fall here, he whispered, his voice thick with self-loathing. I pulled you. I aimed at you. She froze. What are you saying? Years ago, he gasped. I wrote a program. A lure. I predicted someone like you would be captured. I built a trap to catch a pawn. I never knew it would be you. But I did it. I used you. I am the reason. She stared. The shock in her purple eyes was terrifying. It was worse than her anger. You dared, she whispered. I was just a kid, he pleaded. I was angry. About Liam. I was playing a game. Her shock shattered, replaced by a cold fury he hadn't seen since Kalar's broadcast. A game, she hissed. Her voice was low and lethal. You sat in your box and you played God. You pulled me from the sky like a piece on a board. My capture, my humiliation, my terror. You used it as an opportunity. Yes, he whispered. I am no different than them. You are not different, she exploded. The towel fell from her shoulder. She didn't notice. You are exactly like them. Arrogance, human arrogance. To see everything as a tool to manipulate a war for your own petty revenge. You're right, he shouted back, standing up. I was. I built the trap. But I fell in love with you. All of it, she accused, advancing on him. Our alliance, our link, the nexus. It was all built on your lie. It started with it, he yelled. But it didn't end that way. I didn't know you. She stopped, 1 foot from him. She was breathing heavily. The fury was still there, a storm in her eyes. But something else was rising. A new thought, a shock of a different kind. You were one person, she said, her voice suddenly quiet. A data gremlin, in a box. And you reached into time and steered a war. She looked at him, really looked at him. The anger was fading, replaced by a terrifying awe. That is the most arrogant, she breathed. The most insane and the most brilliant thing I have ever encountered. She was furious. And she was impressed. The tension broke. They just stared at each other in the ruins of his confession. He sank back into his chair. I am sorry, Salith, for the plan, for using you. I wasn't that person when you met me, but I was him once. She was silent for a long time. She calmly took the towel and wrapped it around herself. No, she said finally, her voice level. You were not like them. He looked up. We both used each other. Rowan Blake, she said, her gaze unflinching. Let us not lie now. When I fell into this room, I did not see an ally. I saw a tool, a key, a primitive who could operate your machines to get me my throne. I was just as guilty as you. So, he whispered, we were both monsters. We were desperate, she corrected. Pierce and Kalar hid their manipulations. They lied until the end. We are here. We are admitting the truth. That is the difference. That is the humanity I have learned from you. The capacity to see your own grotesque flaws and not look away. The strength to apologize. They let that truth settle in the room. It was a new foundation. Harder, but real. The final scene. The observation deck. The academy hummed below them. In a zero-gravity chamber, human and Nairi students were practicing joint neural interfacing. Safely. Ethically. Rowan and Salith stood side by side watching. You are teaching them your cheats, are you not? Salith asked. Her voice was light, teasing. I felt you slipped them the no-clip command during the ethics simulation, Rowan grinned. They need to learn to think outside the box. It's creative problem-solving. You said so yourself. Salith sighed. A fond, exasperated sound. You are incorrigible. Do you realize what a diplomatic catastrophe this is? What Rowan asked. Teaching. No. This, she said, gesturing between the two of them. An Empress in exile, consorting with a scandalous civilian data gremlin. My former court. What remains of it is apoplectic. They say this association is a disaster. Rowan looked at her. He smirked. Yeah. Well, good thing we're not in your court. Then, we're in space. The rules are a bit different here. He held out his hand. She looked at it. His human hand. Then, slowly, with all the regal dignity in the universe, she placed her long, cobalt blue, three-fingered hand into his. They stood together, silhouetted against the stars, watching the future they had broken and built anew. The journey was just beginning.